The first thing I heard when I opened the ballroom doors was my brother raising a glass to my death. To Adrian. More than 60 people lifted champagne. My mother stood beneath a 6-foot photograph of me. My younger sister was crying. My father had one hand on my brother's shoulder. And my brother, Colin Mercer, was wearing my watch. Not a similar watch. Mine. The steel Omega my grandfather gave me when I turned 25. The one I had been wearing 6 weeks earlier when a charter boat sank 20 miles off the Maine coast. I stopped in the doorway. Wet August sunlight spilled behind me. Nobody noticed. Not yet. Colin continued his toast. My brother spent his whole life taking care of this family. True. So I think he would be happy knowing everything he built will stay with the people he loved. That sentence made me forget how tired I was. Everything he built. Stay with the people he loved. I had spent 38 days being treated as missing. Not legally dead. Not declared dead by a court. Missing. Yet behind Colin, on a long memorial table, sat framed photographs of properties I owned. Our family's old house in Kennebunkport. A commercial building in Portland. The lake cabin in Rangeley. And, at the center, a silver-framed photograph of Mercer Civil Works, the engineering and infrastructure company I had spent 14 years building. There were small engraved cards beneath the pictures. I could read 3 from the doorway. For Colin, Mercer Civil Works. For Natalie, Rangeley House. For Mom and Dad, Portland Income Properties. My funeral had become an estate allocation meeting. While I was alive. I almost laughed. Then my father saw me. His champagne glass fell. It hit the hardwood floor and shattered. The sound cut through the room. Everyone turned. My mother stared at me. Her mouth opened. No sound came out. My sister, Natalie, grabbed the edge of the memorial table. And Colin. Colin stopped smiling. For one long second, nobody moved. Then I stepped inside. Sorry. My voice was rougher than I remembered. 38 days of hospital rooms, Coast Guard interviews, and a fractured rib would do that. I guess I'm late. Someone screamed. A woman near the front dropped her champagne. My mother whispered. Adrian? I looked at the giant photograph behind her. Black suit. White shirt. A picture from my company's 10th anniversary dinner. Underneath it. Adrian Mercer. 1987 to 2026. A life of duty, family, and generosity. I stared at the dates. Then at my mother. You gave me a death year. Her knees nearly buckled. Natalie caught her. Adrian. My father finally moved. He came toward me as though approaching something supernatural. His face was white. Son. Still me. He touched my shoulder. Hard enough to hurt. Apparently that convinced him. Oh my God. Then he pulled me into a hug. I did not return it. Not immediately. Because over his shoulder, I was still looking at Colin. My brother had not moved. He was holding the champagne flute in one hand. My watch was on the other wrist. 6 weeks earlier, I left Portland Harbor aboard a 42-foot charter vessel called the North Haven. The trip was not recreational. Mercer Civil Works had been bidding on a coastal reinforcement project near Vinyl Haven, and I wanted to inspect one of the proposed landing sites personally before committing our engineering team. There were 5 people aboard. The captain. A deckhand. 2 marine surveyors. And me. At 3:17 p.m., a mechanical fire started below deck. At 3:29, we lost communications. At approximately 3:40, the North Haven began taking water. 4 of us made it into an inflatable raft. The deckhand did not. That part still woke me at night. A storm pushed us southeast. Our emergency beacon malfunctioned after several hours. By the second day, we had lost sight of the search aircraft. By the third, one surveyor was delirious from dehydration. On the 4th morning, a Canadian fishing boat found 3 of us. The captain had died during the night. I spent 9 days in a hospital in Nova Scotia under the wrong name because the wallet recovered from the raft belonged to the other surviving surveyor and I had no identification. A clerical error became worse when I developed pneumonia. By the time the hospital identified me correctly and notified American authorities, my family had already spent more than a month believing I was probably dead. That part one could understand. The Coast Guard had suspended active searching after 17 days. The wreckage had been located. 2 confirmed fatalities. No sign of me. Grief did irrational things. A memorial service? Painful, but understandable. A funeral without a body? Still understandable. What I did not understand were the property cards. Or my watch. Or why Colin had just toasted the distribution of assets belonging to a living man who had never been declared dead. Mom finally reached me. Her hands went to my face. "You're alive." "Yes." She started crying so hard she could barely breathe. I thought. I know. We buried an empty casket. I looked past her. There it was. Near the stage. Closed. Polished walnut. Flowers across the top. My name engraved on a brass plate. My stomach turned. I looked away. Natalie came next. She hit me once in the chest. Not hard. Then immediately hugged me. "You idiot." My rib screamed. I grunted. She jumped back. "Oh God. Are you hurt?" "Fractured rib." She started crying harder. "I thought you were dead." "I know. I called you every day for 2 weeks." "I know." "How?" "Phone records." She laughed through tears. For a moment, she looked exactly like my little sister again. Not a woman standing beside a framed photograph of a house she apparently inherited before my funeral toast finished. Then I looked at the card. Her eyes followed mine. Everything changed. "Adrian. What is that?" She froze. My mother turned. "What?" I walked toward the memorial table. The crowd parted. Nobody spoke. I picked up the silver card beneath the Rangeley cabin photograph. "For Natalie, Rangeley House." Below that, in smaller letters. "As Adrian wished." I looked at her. Did I? Her face drained. Colin said. "Of course." I turned. My brother finally put down his champagne. "Adrian, this isn't what it looks like. That sentence should be illegal." Nothing good ever followed it. I held up the card. "What does it look like?" It was symbolic. Symbolic ownership? No. "Then why is my company under your name?" Several guests looked at Colin. He walked toward us. "Calm now." "Too calm. We thought you were dead." I noticed. Dad was falling apart. My father's face hardened. "Don't drag me into this." "Interesting." Colin stopped. I asked. "Who authorized asset transfers?" His eyes changed. "Not much." "Enough. No one transferred your estate." "Good." I pointed toward my company photograph. "So Mercer Civil Works is still mine." He hesitated. My body went cold. "Colin. It's complicated." There it was. The second sentence people used when they wanted time. "What did you do?" Mom whispered. "Adrian, maybe not here." I looked around. Friends. Employees. Neighbors. Family. My company's controller was standing near the bar. Our outside accountant was there. So was Rebecca Hall, a lawyer I recognized from my parents' estate planning. This was not just a funeral. People had been brought here to witness something. I looked at Rebecca. Was my estate opened? She immediately shook her head. No. That was the correct answer. Was I legally declared dead? No. Then what exactly has been divided? Rebecca looked at Colin. Not me. That told me where to look. Colin exhaled. Some temporary ownership and management arrangements were made. Temporary. Yes. With whose authority? Adrian. Whose? My father said quietly. Colin had your power of attorney. I turned toward him. What? The old one. I stared. Years earlier, after Dad suffered a stroke, all 4 of us updated emergency documents. I had signed a durable financial power of attorney naming Colin as alternate agent if I became incapacitated. Alternate. Not primary. My primary agent was my attorney, Leah Davenport. And the document specifically required written certification of incapacity from 2 physicians before anyone could use it. Missing was not incapacity. Presumed dead was not incapacity. Being in a Canadian hospital certainly did not authorize my brother to distribute property. I looked back at Colin. You used my PUA? His jaw tightened. Leah couldn't be reached. That sounded wrong immediately. Leah answered emails from Machu Picchu. What does that have to do with anything? We needed to protect the company. From what? From having no decision maker. I have a COO. He wouldn't approve the bridge financing. My pulse changed. Bridge financing. This was new. What financing? Colin glanced at my father. Wrong move. Dad looked genuinely confused. What financing? Colin realized he had said too much. I stepped closer. What did you sign? Nothing that can't be unwound. There. My anger disappeared. That was always the dangerous moment. When emotion became precision. Tell me. He lowered his voice. Mercer Civil had a liquidity problem after you disappeared. That company had 11 million in cash reserves. Not after the Harbor Ridge mobilization deposits. I stared at him. Harbor Ridge was our largest current project. A state-backed flood control contract. Deposits were scheduled. But not enough to wipe us out. Unless something else happened. Who moved the money? Colin said nothing. My father asked again. What financing? Rebecca stepped forward. Adrian, I think you should stop this conversation until you have counsel. I looked at her. That bad? I didn't say that. You didn't need to. I took out my phone. The one the Coast Guard liaison had given me that morning after my replacement identification cleared. No company apps yet. No banking access. 38 days away from my life and I was effectively a guest inside it. I called Leah. She answered on the first ring. Adrian? Her voice broke. That surprised me. Yeah. Jesus Christ. You heard? The Coast Guard called me 40 minutes ago. Are you in Portland? Yes. Come to the Whitmore Hotel. A pause. Why? I'm at my funeral. Silence. Then. What? And apparently Colin has been using my power of attorney. Her voice changed instantly. Lawyer first. Do not sign anything. I wasn't planning to. Do not authorize anything verbally. Okay. Do not let anyone characterize prior transactions as ratified. I looked at Colin. He could hear enough to understand. His face changed. Good. Leah continued. I'm coming. I ended the call. Then I noticed something on the memorial table. A folder. Cream paper. My name on top. I picked it up. Colin moved immediately. Adrian. Too fast. I opened it. Inside was a document titled Family Asset Transition Memorandum. Not a will. Not probate. An internal agreement. My parents. Natalie. Colin. All signatures present. Mine absent. The document described how my family intended to honor Adrian's known wishes, while formal legal matters remained pending. Known wishes. Interesting. Mercer Civil Works voting control was to be exercised by Colin. The Rangeley property would be occupied and maintained by Natalie. Income from the Portland properties would support my parents. My personal investment accounts would be preserved for later administration. Then I reached the final page. A sentence had been highlighted. Colin Mercer is authorized to take all actions reasonably necessary to preserve Adrian Mercer's business and property interests pending final determination of death and estate administration. Authorized. By my family. Not by me. Not by a court. Not by any document I had signed. Just people dividing responsibility over assets because they believed the owner would never walk through the door. I looked up. Who drafted this? Rebecca said immediately. I did not. Good. Colin's silence answered. Your lawyer? He nodded once. What did you use it for? Adrian. What did you use it for? The room was completely silent now. Nobody remembered the champagne. Nobody remembered the funeral. Colin looked at me. And for the first time, my brother seemed genuinely afraid. Company bank access. My mother made a small sound. I kept going. What else? A temporary voting proxy. That I didn't sign? He said nothing. What else? Some property management changes. Transfers? Not exactly. That phrase was worse than yes. I looked at his wrist. My watch. Take that off. He froze. What? My watch. His face reddened. Mom gave it to me. I looked at her. She started crying again. I thought you were gone. I softened. Slightly. I know. Then back to Colin. Take it off. He removed it. Placed it in my palm. The metal was warm from his skin. I closed my fingers around it. 38 days missing. They gave away my watch. My houses. My company authority. Maybe my money. Maybe more. I looked at the champagne glass Colin had abandoned. Then at the giant photograph announcing my death. You were saying something when I came in. He stared. The toast. No answer. I picked up the untouched glass nearest me. Raised it. Everyone watched. To family. Nobody moved. I looked directly at Colin. The people who love you enough to bury you. His face went white. Then I finished. And sometimes enough to start spending the inheritance before they check whether you're actually dead. I set the glass down without drinking. The ballroom remained silent. Outside, a car pulled up. Leah. Good. Because my funeral was over. Now I needed to find out what my family had done with the 38 days they thought belonged to them. Leah Davenport walked into my funeral wearing running shoes and a navy suit. That told me exactly how fast she had come. She normally looked as though someone ironed her before meetings. Tonight, her hair was pulled into a loose knot, her suit jacket was unbuttoned, and she was carrying a laptop bag in one hand and her phone in the other. She saw me. Stopped. Then crossed the ballroom and hugged me hard enough to remind me about the fractured rib. I hissed. She immediately stepped back. Sorry. Worth it. Her eyes moved over my face. You look terrible. Apparently death doesn't agree with me. For half a second she laughed. Then she looked at the memorial table. The property cards. The family transition memorandum. My watch in my hand. Her expression went cold. What happened? I handed her the memorandum. Start there. She read the first page standing up. Then the second. By the third, her jaw had tightened. Who drafted this? Colin answered from across the room. My counsel. Leah looked up. Name. Martin Keats. I know Martin. That did not sound encouraging. Did he tell you this document transferred ownership? No. Did he tell you it created legal authority over Adrian's assets? Colin hesitated. He said it documented the family's intentions. That is not what I asked. My father stepped in. Leah, we were trying to keep things functioning. She looked at him. I understand grief. Then she held up the memorandum. This is not probate. Nobody answered. It is not a court order. Still nothing. It is not a shareholder consent executed by Adrian. She looked at Colin. And unless there is another document I have not seen, it does not authorize you to use Adrian's property. That finally broke the room's paralysis. Guests began moving. Quietly. A few came toward me. I shook hands. Accepted hugs. Answered the same question repeatedly. Where had I been? Was I really okay? When did I get back? But my attention stayed on Colin. He was texting someone. Fast. I looked at Leah. She noticed too. Colin. He looked up. Put the phone down. His face hardened. You don't represent me. No. Leah's voice stayed calm. But I represent Adrian, and if you are instructing anyone to move, delete, alter, or transfer property connected to him or Mercer Civil Works, you are creating a very bad evening for yourself. The phone stopped moving. Good. My mother whispered. Can we please not do this in front of everyone? I looked around. She was right about one thing. This was no longer a funeral. It was becoming evidence with catering. Clear the room. My father frowned. What? Family stays. Rebecca stays. Colin stays. I looked at Leah. Anyone else? The company controller. I found him near the bar. Thomas Greer. 53. At Mercer Civil Works longer than half our project managers had been alive. He looked miserable. Tom. He came over. Adrian. You knew? His face tightened. I knew they were holding the memorial. No. About Colin using authority over the company. Silence. That was enough. You stay too. Within 15 minutes, most guests were gone. Flowers remained. The closed casket remained. The giant photograph of me remained. And 7 living people sat around a table built for a dead man. I took the chair at the head. Not symbolically. It was the only one facing everyone. Leah sat beside me. Colin opposite. My parents together. Natalie beside Mom. Rebecca Hall near the end. Tom beside her. I placed the family memorandum in the center. Start from day one. Colin crossed his arms. You need to rest. No. You've been missing for over a month. Yes. You were hospitalized. Yes. You're not thinking clearly. There it was. My brother had spent 38 days acting on the assumption I was dead. I had been back in the room less than an hour and he was already trying to make my judgment the problem. Leah said. Adrian is asking factual questions. Colin looked at her. This is a family matter. No. She tapped the folder. The second you used documents to affect corporate accounts, it stopped being only that. I looked at Tom. What happened to the $11 million in company cash? He glanced at Colin. Wrong answer before he even spoke. Tom. He looked back at me. Harbor Ridge required mobilization earlier than expected. How much? 4.8 million. That still leaves more than 6. Vendor deposits. How much? 2.1. Still 4. He swallowed. Then there was the Stonewell payment. I stopped. What Stonewell payment? Colin said quickly. That was necessary. I looked at him. What was necessary? No answer. Tom opened his laptop. 3 weeks after you disappeared, Mercer Civil Works paid $3.6 million to Stonewell Equipment Holdings. I stared at him. For what? Priority access to specialty drilling equipment. That contract wasn't approved. Colin leaned forward. You weren't here. That does not answer the question. We were going to lose Harbor Ridge. Who told you that? The project team. Name. Silence. I looked at Tom. Was Harbor Ridge actually at risk because of equipment access? Tom hesitated. There was concern. Concern is not the same as breach. No. Was there a state notice? No. Was there a cure demand? No. Were we behind schedule? Not formally. I turned back to Colin. So you spent $3.6 million without an immediate contractual requirement. We needed certainty. That word. People loved spending other people's money on certainty. What is Stonewell? He said nothing. Tom answered. A newly formed equipment leasing company. My pulse slowed. Newly formed when? 8 weeks ago. 2 weeks before I disappeared. That mattered. Who owns it? Nobody answered. I looked at Leah. She had already opened a business registry search. I'll find out. Colin leaned back. You're making this sound corrupt. I'm asking who got $3.6 million. It purchased access to equipment we already had sourcing options for. His face tightened. You weren't the only person capable of running the company. There it was. Not grief. Not emergency. Resentment. I almost smiled. I never said I was. You acted like it. My father said quietly. Colin. He ignored him. You vanish and suddenly everyone realizes nothing can move because Adrian has to sign everything. That's not true. It is. No. I looked at Tom. Who had ordinary operating authority while I was missing? He answered immediately. Our COO, Sarah Fenwick. Exactly. Colin's jaw tightened. Sarah refused to take risks. She refused your financing? Yes. Good. We were getting somewhere. What financing? Tom opened another file. A loan agreement. Not $50 million. Not some absurd secret mortgage. $8 million. Bridge facility from North Coast Commercial Lending. Borrower. Mercer Civil Works Incorporated. Collateral. Certain accounts receivable and project proceeds. Additional support. A voting proxy and limited management control covenant if specified defaults occurred. I stared at the screen. When? 26 days ago. Who signed? Tom looked at Colin. Of course. Under what title? Acting managing member. I almost laughed. Mercer Civil Works was a corporation. Not an LLC. Where did that title come from? Colin said. Keith said the lender needed someone with authority. That still doesn't answer it. Rebecca finally spoke. Adrian, I reviewed none of that financing. Did you know about it? I knew Colin was seeking liquidity. Did you know he was presenting himself as having my voting authority? No. That seemed genuine. I turned to my parents. Did you? Mom shook her head immediately. Dad said. He said the company needed temporary authority. Not the same thing. Natalie whispered. I thought the paperwork was just to keep payroll running. I looked at her. Did you sign anything? Her eyes filled. The family memorandum. Anything else? No. Good. My family might have been premature. Greedy in appearance. Careless. But the actual corporate action was narrowing toward Colin. That mattered. I did not need everyone to become a villain. I needed the truth. Leah asked. Tom, did North Coast receive a copy of Adrian's power of attorney? Yes. Which version? Tom sent it to her. She opened the PDF. Read one page. Then looked at me. This is the 2021 instrument. Yes. It names me as primary agent. Yes. Colin as alternate. Yes. And activation requires written certification by 2 licensed physicians that you are unable to manage financial affairs. Yes. She looked at Colin. Where are the certifications? He said nothing. My father looked confused. What certifications? I leaned back. There it was. Colin? He finally said. We had letters. Leah's voice changed. From whom? Doctors. Names. Dr. Pierce and Dr. Hahn. I knew neither. Leah held out her hand. Copies. I don't have them here. Then where? My office. I stared at him. Doctors examined me while I was missing? His face hardened. They reviewed the circumstances. Leah actually laughed. Once. Not amused. A physician cannot certify financial incapacity by reviewing a newspaper article about a missing person. They believed you were likely dead. Dead is not incapacitated under this document. That sentence silenced everyone. Exactly. My POA had no dead man trigger. If I died, estate documents governed. If I became incapacitated, the POA could activate. Missing fell into neither category automatically. Colin had tried to use the gap. I asked. Did North Coast's counsel review the activation conditions? Tom looked sick. They received the physician letters. Did they receive Leah's written declination as primary agent? Silence. I looked at Leah. She already knew. No. She had never declined. Meaning Colin was not even next in line. He had skipped the first agent entirely. What did you tell them about Leah? I asked. Colin looked away. That was enough. What did you tell them? She was unavailable. Leah leaned forward. I was in New York. You weren't returning calls. My firm has 27 attorneys. You didn't call me back for 2 days. Her expression went flat. So you converted 48 hours into legal unavailability? No answer. I looked at Tom. Why did you accept Colin's authority? He swallowed. I didn't. That surprised me. What? I refused to recognize him as CEO or controlling shareholder. Colin's jaw tightened. Tom continued. I told North Coast our record still showed you as chairman and controlling shareholder, Sarah as COO, and Leah as your designated agent if properly activated. Then how did the loan close? Tom looked ashamed. I wasn't the signer. Who was? Colin and North Coast. Company bank account? No. That made no sense. Then he explained. The lender had not deposited the $8 million into Mercer Civil Works' ordinary operating account. It funded a newly created restricted account at North Coast. Colin could direct draws only for specified company expenses. Some payroll. Harbor Ridge vendors. And Stonewell. My eyes narrowed. How much went to Stonewell from the bridge? Another $1.4 million. The room went silent. Total paid to Stonewell. $5 million. Exactly. I looked at Colin. What is Stonewell? He said nothing. Leah's laptop chimed. Business registry result. She read it. Then became completely still. What? She turned the screen toward me. Stonewell Equipment Holdings LLC. Registered agent. A corporate service company. Manager. CJM Ventures LLC. I knew those initials. Colin James Mercer. My brother. I looked across the table. Nobody else understood yet. I did. What is CJM Ventures? Colin's face had gone pale. Dad whispered. Colin? He said nothing. Leah clicked through the state filing. Manager of CJM Ventures. Colin J. Mercer. My mother covered her mouth. Natalie stared at him. My father stood. You owned Stonewell? Colin finally spoke. Partly. My voice stayed quiet. How partly? 40%. Who owns the rest? A partner. Name. Bryce Talbot. I knew Bryce. Former equipment broker. 2 years earlier, Mercer Civil Works had stopped using him after he tried to inflate subcontractor pricing. I had personally removed him from our vendor list. And while I was missing, my brother created a company with him. Then sent that company $5 million from my business. The shape of the problem changed instantly. The funeral. The asset cards. The family memorandum. Those were offensive. Maybe even grotesque. But this? This was money. Current money. Transferred under authority Colin may never have legally possessed. to a company he partially owned. I looked at Tom. Did finance know Colin had an ownership interest? No. Did Sarah? No. Did North Coast? I don't know. I looked at Colin. Was it disclosed? He slammed his palm against the table. Yes. Everyone jumped. Finally. Anger. Good. Bryce disclosed the ownership structure to the lender. To Mercer Civil Works? Silence. Did you disclose your interest to our board? No answer. We have a related party transaction policy. I know. You needed independent approval. I know. You didn't get it. No. There. A clean fact. Not theft yet. Not fraud yet. But an undisclosed conflict inside my company. I asked. Why Stonewell? Because Bryce could secure the equipment faster. For $5 million. We bought priority. Did Stonewell own the equipment? A pause. Some. How much? Adrian. How much? He looked at Tom. Tom did not help him. Colin finally said. None at signing. My father sat back down as if someone had hit him. Stonewell had taken $5 million without owning the equipment it supposedly guaranteed us. Maybe it had lawful contracts. Maybe deposits. Maybe brokerage rights. We did not know yet. But one thing was already obvious. Colin had put himself on both sides of the transaction, acting for my company under questionable authority, and benefiting through Stonewell. I stood. The room seemed smaller now. Tom. Yes? Freeze any non-contractual draw requests Colin submitted. I can do that. Do not breach valid company obligations. Understood. Sarah still COO? Yes. She resumes ordinary operating control immediately. She never technically lost it. Good. One less mess. I looked at Leah. What about North Coast? We notify them you are alive and dispute any authority purportedly exercised under the POA. Does that cancel the loan? Not automatically. Of course not. The company had received value. Some funds had paid legitimate expenses. A court was not going to pretend $8 million vanished because Colin's authority was defective. We separate enforceability of the company debt from Colin's authority and any related party misconduct. Exactly. Real consequences. Not magical erasure. I turned to my family. The memorial was premature. Mom started crying again. The asset division was meaningless unless legally implemented. Natalie nodded quickly. And none of you touch my property again until everything is reviewed. My father said. Agreed. Mom nodded. Natalie too. Then I looked at Colin. He remained seated. You. He lifted his eyes. Give Leah every document connected to Stonewell, North Coast, the POA, and any action you took under my name or authority. And if I don't? Leah answered. Then we obtain them another way. He laughed bitterly. There he is. I frowned. Who? The real Adrian. What does that mean? You come back from the dead and within an hour you're issuing orders again. I stared at him. You sent $5 million to a company you own. For Mercer Civil. Then documentation should help you. He stopped. That was the thing about legitimate transactions. Evidence was not an enemy. I took my watch from the table and fastened it around my wrist. The clasp clicked shut. My own property. Back where it belonged. Then I looked at the empty casket. Funeral's over. Nobody moved. I turned toward the ballroom doors. Behind me, Leah said quietly. Adrian. I stopped. She was looking at her screen again. Her face had changed. What? I found Martin Keats's petition. What petition? A filing prepared 4 days ago. My stomach tightened. For what? She looked directly at me. To ask a Maine court for authority to administer your estate based on presumed death. Silence. That alone was not shocking. After enough time and under certain circumstances, families could seek legal determinations. But 38 days? And I was already back. I asked. Was it filed? No. Then why does it matter? Leah turned the laptop toward me. Attached to the draft petition was an asset schedule. My properties. My investment accounts. My company interests. All listed. Estimated values included. At the bottom was a proposed distribution plan. I read the first name. Then the second. Then stopped. Because Colin's share was not just Mercer Civil Works. The draft allocated him control of nearly everything with meaningful cash flow. Not ownership immediately. Control. Management rights. Fees. Decision authority. The estate split at the funeral had looked sentimental. The court filing showed something else. Someone had already converted grief into a financial plan. And Colin had positioned himself at the center of it. I looked back at my brother. He did not ask what Leah found. Which told me he already knew. 38 days ago, my family lost me at sea. Tonight, I came home during the toast. Now I was beginning to understand something much colder. Some of them had mourned me. But my brother had also started planning what my death could do for him. I did not sleep that night. Not because I was afraid Colin would move more money. Leah had already sent preservation notices. Tom had frozen discretionary draws. Sarah Fenwick was back in unquestioned operating control at Mercer Civil Works. North Coast had been told I was alive and disputed Colin's authority. The immediate damage was contained. What kept me awake was the draft petition. The funeral could be explained by grief. The property cards could be explained by sentimentality. Even the ridiculous family transition memorandum could be explained as people trying to create order in a situation nobody understood. The petition was different. A petition required preparation. Asset values. Supporting facts. Legal arguments. Schedules. Proposed fiduciaries. Someone had sat down while I was still officially missing and built a roadmap for managing my property after death. And Colin was at the center of it. At 7:10 the next morning, Leah arrived at my temporary apartment with coffee and a cardboard file box. "You look worse. I was dead yesterday." "Fair." She set the box down. "What is that?" "Everything my office could pull overnight." I opened the lid. Copies of my estate plan. Power of attorney. Shareholder agreements. Board minutes. Property titles. Insurance policies. My will. All documents I should have known better than anyone. But after 14 years of running an engineering company, I had learned a dangerous habit. I remembered the business documents. I trusted lawyers to remember the personal ones. Leah opened my will. First important fact. What? Colin does not inherit Mercer Civil Works. I know. Say what your plan actually does. I looked at the page. If I died, my voting shares in Mercer Civil Works passed into a testamentary trust. The trustee was not Colin. Not my parents. Not Natalie. It was an independent fiduciary, Pine Harbor Trust Company, with instructions to preserve the business long enough for a sale, management transition, or employee-led recapitalization depending on board conditions. I had designed it that way deliberately. Mercer Civil Works employed 212 people. I did not want my death turning the company into a family inheritance fight. Natalie received a cash bequest and the right to purchase the Rangeley cabin at a favorable appraised value. My parents received lifetime income from a separate trust funded with investment assets. Colin received a cash trust distribution over 10 years. No controlling company shares. No Portland income properties. No automatic cabin. Nothing resembled the cards displayed at my funeral. Leah tapped the draft petition. So when the memorandum says, "as Adrian wished," it wasn't. No. Did they have my will? Your original is with my firm. Did Colin know the terms? Leah hesitated. He knew the broad structure. How broad? He knew Mercer Civil Works was not passing directly to him. That mattered. I looked at the proposed estate distribution attached to Keats's petition. Colin exercising control over Mercer Civil Works. Colin managing the Portland properties. Colin receiving fiduciary fees. Colin coordinating asset sales. He knew my actual plan denied him those powers. Yet the petition proposed them anyway. Could a court approve that? Not just because he asked. Then why draft it? Leverage. I looked up. Leah sat across from me. If you had been declared dead, your actual estate plan would still matter. Martin Keats could not simply replace your will with this schedule. So what was the strategy? Possibly to argue emergency administration before the will was admitted, obtain temporary authority, then shape the early process. How much damage could temporary authority do? Depends on the order. She pointed to the Stonewall payment summary. You've already seen what Colin can accomplish with ambiguity and a few weeks. That answer was enough. At 8:30, Sarah Fenwick joined us by video. She had spent the night at Mercer Civil Works headquarters with Tom. Sarah was 46, former Army Corps of Engineers, and one of the few people in my company who had never cared whether I liked her. That was why I made her COO. How bad? I asked. She did not soften it. Operationally, manageable. Financially, uncomfortable. Legally, not my lane. Good answer. She continued. The bridge loan kept payroll and Harbor Ridge mobilization moving, but we did not need 8 million. How much did we actually need? About 3.2. That made my jaw tighten. So Colin borrowed more than twice the gap. Yes. Why? He said we needed reserve capacity because banks would get nervous if you were declared dead. That explanation almost sounded reasonable. Almost. What did you say? I told him ordinary working capital was sufficient. And Stonewell? I rejected it. There. Current evidence. Clean. When? 29 days ago. Before the first payment? Yes. Why? Conflict concerns and pricing. You knew he owned it? No. Then what conflict? Bryce Talbot. Of course. Sarah had removed Bryce from a sourcing call 2 years earlier after he inflated equipment margins. She continued. I told Colin we had 2 established vendors who could source comparable rigs. At what price? Roughly 3.1 million total over the mobilization period. Stonewell had received 5. Why did he override you? He said temporary executive authority let him make strategic sourcing decisions. Did you believe that? No. Then why did the payment happen? Sarah looked frustrated. Because the first transfer didn't come from our normal treasury account. The bridge facility. Exactly. North Coast controlled the restricted account. Colin directed the draw under authority they accepted. Sarah never touched it. I asked. Did you tell the board? Yes. When? 25 days ago. I froze. Which board? Mercer Civil. Who attended? Tom, me, Colin, Evelyn Park, and George Wallace. Our 2 independent directors. Minutes? Yes. Send them to Leah. Already did. Leah's laptop chimed. She opened the file. Sarah had objected to Stonewell. Tom had raised authority concerns. Evelyn requested outside legal review. Then Colin stated that because of my presumed incapacity and the urgent risk to Harbor Ridge, delay would expose the company to greater harm. George asked whether Colin had a financial interest in Stonewell. The minutes recorded Colin's answer. No direct personal interest beyond ordinary family-related business considerations. I read it twice. My stomach went cold. Family-related business considerations? Leah looked at me. That's a strange phrase. He owned 40%. Yes. Through CJM Ventures. Yes. So when a director asked whether he had a financial interest, he said no direct personal interest. Yes. There was the first statement that looked materially worse than bad judgment. I kept my voice steady. Sarah, did anyone know about CJM? No. Did Colin disclose it later? Not to me. What happened after the board meeting? Evelyn requested the Stonewell transaction be paused. Was it? For 1 day. 1. Then Colin provided the physician letters and a legal memorandum from Keats's office saying he had temporary authority to protect your business interests. Leah's face hardened. I want that memorandum. Sarah sent it. We opened it together. The language was careful. It did not state Colin was unquestionably authorized. It said there was a good faith basis to treat him as acting under alternate agent authority because I was missing, presumed unable to manage affairs, and the primary agent had not acted. Leah nearly laughed. I was never asked to act. Exactly. If she had been asked, she would have refused to recognize Colin's self-dealing. So they skipped that step. The memo also cited the physician letters. I asked. Can we get those? Leah already had them. She opened the first. Dr. Malcolm Pierce, psychiatrist. He had never examined me. The letter stated that based on reports I was missing at sea and had not communicated for over 2 weeks, I was functionally unable to manage financial affairs. Not medically incapacitated. Functionally unable. The second physician, Dr. Suhan, used almost identical language. I stared at the phrases. Did Keats tell them what the POA required? Leah read the activation clause again. 2 licensed physicians certifying that I was unable to manage property or financial affairs due to incapacity. Could missing at sea satisfy that? Maybe someone could argue it. The problem was not obviously absurd anymore. That made it more dangerous. Leah said. This may not be a forged activation. It may be a contested one. I nodded. Important distinction. Colin could have believed the POA activated. North Coast could have accepted counsel's interpretation. That did not excuse undisclosed self-dealing. It did mean I needed to stop treating every procedural irregularity as criminal. The story was narrowing. Good. By noon, Leah had arranged a meeting with Martin Keats. He arrived at her office with his own counsel. That told me he understood the stakes. Martin was 60, expensive suit, careful eyes. I had met him twice at charity dinners. He shook my hand. Mr. Mercer, I'm glad you're alive. I imagine. He accepted that. Leah placed the draft estate petition on the table. Explain. Martin looked at his lawyer. Then answered. Your family requested contingency planning. Who? Primarily Colin. My parents? They participated in discussions. Natalie? One meeting. Did you review my actual will? No. That surprised me. Why not? We did not have access to the original. You knew Leah represented me. Yes. Did you contact her? I did. Leah shook her head. You emailed my general intake address twice. Martin's lawyer intervened. My client made reasonable efforts. Leah ignored him. I asked. Why didn't you call? Martin looked at me. Colin represented that you and Ms. Davenport had become professionally estranged. I almost laughed. Based on? He said you were moving estate work elsewhere. False. Current. Specific. I looked at Leah. She wrote it down. Martin continued. The family was concerned no estate representative would be available quickly if the court later determined you had died. 38 days after I disappeared? We had not filed. But you drafted. Yes. Why was Colin proposed as temporary administrator? Because your family believed he had the most familiarity with your businesses. Did you know my will used an independent fiduciary? No. Did Colin? I can't speak to what he knew. Fair. I pushed the asset schedule toward him. Who created this? My office based on information supplied by Colin and your parents. Who proposed the allocations? He hesitated. Those were family proposals. Specifically, Colin proposed business control. Of course. Natalie proposed the cabin? No. That surprised me. Who did? Your mother. I leaned back. Interesting. And the Portland properties? Your father initially suggested income should support both parents. Also understandable. And the language giving Colin authority over most cash flow assets? Colin's proposal. There it was. Not the whole family carving me up greedily. A grieving mother thinking her daughter should have a sentimental cabin. A father thinking rental income could support his wife. Still premature. Still not legally theirs. But emotionally comprehensible. Colin was the one converting temporary grief into control. That distinction mattered. I asked Martin. Did you draft the family transition memorandum? No. Who did? An associate in my office prepared a non-binding family planning summary. Leah slid it over. This? He read it. His expression changed. No. That was not the answer I expected. What do you mean? This is not our document. Silence. Leah leaned forward. Are you sure? Yes. He pointed to the footer. Our firm uses document numbers. This has none. Then the signature blocks. And we would never state that a family agreement authorizes action over a missing adult's assets. My pulse slowed. Then who wrote it? Martin looked at me. I don't know. I did. Or at least I knew where to look. Colin. Again. At 3:20, Tom called. Adrian. What? We found the source file. For the family memorandum? Yes. My heart beat harder. Where? Colin's company laptop. Leah put him on speaker. Tom continued. The metadata shows it was created 12 days after you disappeared. Author? Colin's user profile. No shock. No surprise. Just another piece clicking into place. Any revisions? Yes. By whom? Mostly Colin. One edit by Keats's associate. Martin's face changed across the table. What edit? Tom sent the revision history. The associate had changed one paragraph. Not added authority. Removed it. Original draft. Family members authorize Colin Mercer to exercise all ownership and management rights previously held by Adrian Mercer until probate administration begins. The associate deleted that sentence and replaced it with, family members express their intention that Colin coordinate preservation efforts pending proper legal authority. That was radically different. Then, 2 days later, Colin changed it again. The final funeral version read, Colin Mercer is authorized to take all actions reasonably necessary to preserve Adrian Mercer's business and property interests pending final determination of death and estate administration. He had restored authority language after counsel softened it. Martin's face went pale. My office did not approve that. Current evidence. Clean. I looked at Leah. Preserve everything. Already happening. That evening, my family met at my parents' house. Colin did not come. My mother asked me to anyway. She looked smaller than she had the night before. The giant emotional shock of my return had worn off. Now shame had replaced it. Natalie sat beside her. Dad stood near the fireplace. Nobody offered champagne. Good. Mom spoke first. I want to explain the cabin. You don't have to. I do. She looked at Natalie. You always said Natalie loved Rangeley more than any of us. True. She spent summers there with you after her divorce. Also true. When we thought you were dead, I said you would have wanted her to have it. I looked at Natalie. Did you ask for it? No. Immediate. I swear. I believe you. She began crying anyway. I hated the card. What? The one at the funeral. She wiped her face. I told Colin it felt wrong. Why was it there? He said people needed to know your wishes would be honored. My father looked disgusted. He said the same thing about the Portland properties. There. Colin had converted family grief into public legitimacy. A funeral toast. Property cards. As Adrian wished. If enough relatives repeated it, perhaps later he could point to consensus. Not legal ownership. Narrative ownership. That was his real skill. I asked Dad. Did you know about Stonewell? No. The bridge loan? Not the terms. The petition? I knew Martin was preparing something if you weren't found. Did you know Colin proposed himself to control Mercer Civil? No. Dad's face hardened. He told me an independent trustee would eventually take over. That matched my will more closely. Meaning Colin told different versions to different people. Interesting. Mom whispered. Why would he do this? I did not answer. Not yet. Because motive was still incomplete. Money? Control? Resentment? Maybe all three. But I had learned enough from my return to know not every ugly act needed a dramatic secret underneath it. Sometimes opportunity simply revealed character. I asked one final question. Where is Colin? My father checked his phone. He said he was meeting Bryce. Of course. Stonewell. Leah had already sent a preservation notice to Bryce Talbot. If Colin was meeting him now, that mattered. My phone rang. Tom. I answered. Adrian, we have a problem. What? Stonewell just submitted a termination invoice. My expression hardened. How much? 2.4 million. For what? Cancellation fees and equipment reservation penalties. I almost laughed. After already receiving 5 million? Yes. Is the invoice valid? Sarah says the underlying contract has termination language. Who signed the contract? A pause. Colin. Of course. On behalf of Mercer Civil? Yes. And Stonewell? Tom's silence told me the answer was worse. Bryce signed for Stonewell. So Colin signed one side while owning 40% of the other side. Yes. There it was. A transaction he helped create as purported representative of my company. A vendor he secretly owned. Millions already transferred. Now millions more claimed. The funeral had been insulting. The petition had been calculated. But Stonewell was becoming the real threat. Because if the contract was enforceable, my return from the dead did not erase it. I could reclaim my watch in 10 seconds. I could tear down the funeral portrait. I could tell my family their memorial allocations meant nothing. A signed commercial contract was different. It had counterparties. Reliance. Terms. Potential damages. I looked at my mother. At Natalie. At my father. Then I stood. What now? Dad asked. I picked up my coat. Now I stop investigating my funeral. He frowned. Why? Because the funeral didn't cost me $5 million. Outside, Leah was already pulling into the driveway. I walked toward her car. 38 days missing had given my family time to grieve. It had given Colin time to do something else. He had tried to turn my absence into authority. Now I needed to find out whether Stonewell was a desperate business decision, or the reason he needed me declared dead in the first place. Stonewell's office was not in Portland. It was 40 minutes south, inside a newly renovated industrial park near Biddeford. That bothered me immediately. Not because nice offices proved anything. Because Stonewell had existed for 8 weeks. Yet its website showed photographs of excavators, crawler cranes, marine drilling rigs, and specialty foundation equipment that made it look like a regional operator with years of inventory. Sarah had already confirmed something else. Stonewell owned none of the machines in those photographs. At least not when Mercer Civil paid the first $3.6 million. The company's business model appeared to be brokerage. Reserve equipment from established lessors. Mark up access. Then resell availability to contractors desperate enough to pay. Not illegal. Not automatically dishonest. The question was why Mercer Civil needed a newly formed broker owned partly by my brother when we already had direct vendor relationships. Leah drove. I sat in the passenger seat with my rib wrapped tightly enough that every pothole made me regret surviving. "You should be in bed," she said. "You said that yesterday." "I was right yesterday." "Probably. You're also not going inside alone." "I wasn't planning to." "Good." She glanced at me. "You've become surprisingly reasonable after being presumed dead. Near-death experience. Keep it." We had no appointment with Bryce Talbot. That was deliberate. We also had no intention of storming into Stonewell demanding records. Preservation notices had already gone out. Anything else would be handled through counsel. I only wanted to see the business my brother had sent $5 million to while I was missing. Sometimes addresses told you things spreadsheets did not. Stonewell occupied Suite 210. Second floor. Frosted glass door. 2 employees visible inside. 1 receptionist. 1 man on the phone. No warehouse. No equipment yard. No dispatch board. No sign that millions of dollars of heavy machinery moved through the place. Again, that did not prove wrongdoing. A broker could operate from 2 desks and a laptop. Still, $5 million had bought Mercer Civil priority access. I wanted to know priority access to what. We did not go in. Instead, we continued to a coffee shop across the road. Sarah joined by video. Tom was already on the call. And for the first time, our outside construction counsel, Evan Ross, joined us. He had spent the morning reviewing the Stonewell agreement. "How bad?" I asked. Evan answered immediately. "Worse than I hoped. Better than Colin probably thinks." "Explain." "The termination invoice is not automatically enforceable." "Good. Why?" "The cancellation provision applies only if Stonewell actually reserved specified equipment and incurred non-recoverable commitments." "Did they?" "Unknown. So they need to show their cost." "Yes." "Can they just keep the $5 million? Also depends on performance." Sarah interrupted. "Stonewell has delivered 1 rig." I looked at her. One marine rotary drilling system arrived last week. What was its market lease rate? About $90,000 per month. And we paid $5 million for what? Supposed access to 4 rigs, 2 crawler cranes, and priority marine transport. How much of that has actually been secured? Sarah checked her notes. 1 rig confirmed. 1 crawler crane appears tentatively reserved through another lessor. Everything else is uncertain. I looked through the coffee shop window at Stonewell's office building. Then where did the money go? Nobody answered. That was now the important question. Not whether Stonewell was real. It was. Not whether it provided some value. It had. Where had $5 million gone when so little equipment had actually been committed? Evan said. "We need their vendor contracts, reservation deposits, and bank records through proper process." Leah added. "And we need to know what Colin received personally." "Exactly." At 11:26, Bryce Talbot called me. I almost did not answer. Leah nodded. "Put him on speaker." I did. "Adrian." His voice sounded cheerful. Too cheerful. "Bryce. I heard the miracle. That's 1 word. I'm glad you're alive." "Thanks." A pause. "I assume this is about Stonewell." You called me. Because your people sent legal notices like we robbed a bank. They sent preservation notices. Same message. No. I looked at Leah. She shook her head slightly. Do not argue unnecessarily. Bryce continued. Your brother authorized everything. That's one of the issues being reviewed. He had legal authority. Maybe. Your lawyer gave him power. No. Another pause. Whatever. His counsel said he could act. That still doesn't answer the related party issue. Bryce became quieter. What about it? Colin owned 40% of Stonewell. Yes. Mercer Civil's board didn't know. That's between you and your brother. Maybe. I kept my voice neutral. What did $5 million buy? Priority equipment access. Specific contracts? Yes. With whom? Silence. Bryce. You'll get documents. Good. We're not some shell company. I didn't say you were. You're acting like it. No. I'm asking whether Stonewell spent Mercer Civil's money on the equipment it promised. His tone changed. The money was ours once paid. That sentence mattered. Leah wrote it down. I asked. Under the contract? Yes. All $5 million earned immediately? Mostly. Even if equipment was never delivered? Reservation capacity has value. Then show the reservations. We will. Good. Again. Legitimate transactions like records. Bryce continued. You should also know your brother saved Harbor Ridge. Sarah's face hardened on the screen. I said. How? The direct vendors were going to prioritize other customers. Which vendors? Eastshore Heavy and Calder Marine. I looked at Sarah. She mouthed. False. Interesting. Both? Yes. When? 3 weeks ago. Written notices? You'd have to ask them. I will. A beat of silence. Then Bryce said. Adrian, don't turn this into some family revenge thing. I'm not. Colin made decisions because you were gone. I know. He stepped up. Maybe. He was trying to keep your company alive. That phrase again. Keep my company alive. Yet every actual operator inside Mercer Civil said the company was strained, not dying. I asked. Why does Stonewell need another $2.4 million if it already earned 5? Cancellation provisions. For reservations you haven't shown. We'll show them. Then we have nothing else to discuss. He exhaled sharply. You were always difficult. I hear that a lot. Then I ended the call. Sarah spoke immediately. Eastshore never told us they were dropping priority. Calder? Same. Can you prove it? I have emails. Send them. She did. Eastshore had actually offered Mercer Civil a modified delivery schedule. Calder had proposed substituting one rig for another. Not ideal. Not impossible. Stonewell may have offered faster access. But Colin's claim that we faced imminent equipment failure was exaggerated. That distinction mattered. He did not invent a problem from nothing. He magnified a manageable problem to justify a much more expensive solution involving his own company. The pattern was becoming clearer. At 1, Leah got a call from North Coast Commercial Lending. Their general counsel wanted to meet. Not later. Now. We returned to Portland. North Coast occupied 2 floors of a brick building overlooking Commercial Street. Their general counsel, Melissa Ward, met us with the lender's credit officer. No hostility. That was useful. Melissa opened with. We were informed this morning that Adrian Mercer disputes Colin Mercer's authority under the power of attorney. Yes, Leah said. We also understand Adrian is alive and competent. I almost smiled. Very much. Melissa did not. Bank lawyers rarely rewarded humor during troubled loans. She continued. The facility was extended in good faith based on documentation supplied at closing. I understand. We do not intend to accelerate solely because Mr. Mercer returned. Good. However, authority issues need to be resolved. Leah nodded. Agreed. Then I asked. Did North Coast know Colin owned part of Stonewell? Melissa's eyes moved to the credit officer. Small. Immediate. That was enough. No, she said. The credit officer added. Stonewell was presented as an independent strategic equipment provider. My chest tightened. By Colin? Yes. Bryce disclosed Stonewell's ownership structure to you. The credit officer frowned. No. Bryce had told me the opposite less than 2 hours earlier. Current contradiction. Clean. Leah asked. Did anyone disclose CJM Ventures? No. Collins' 40% interest? No. Any related party nature? No. The room became quieter. Melissa said. That is material information. Of course it was. Because North Coast had funded draws partly to Stonewell. A borrower representative directing lender-controlled money to a business he secretly owned was exactly the kind of fact a commercial lender wanted disclosed. I asked. What did you understand the Stonewell payments were for? Equipment reservation deposits. Refundable? Partially, subject to contract terms. Did you review Stonewell's underlying equipment reservations? No. Why not? Colin provided certifications that the draws were for approved project mobilization expenses. There it was. Certifications. I looked at Leah. She understood. Who signed them? Melissa slid copies across the table. Colin. Under the title. Authorized Agent for Adrian Mercer / Acting Executive Representative. I read the certification. It stated the requested draw was solely for bona fide project expenditures incurred for the benefit of Mercer Civil Works and not for the personal benefit of the authorized agent. My eyes stopped. Not for personal benefit. Yet Colin owned 40% of the recipient. Maybe he had not taken cash distributions. Maybe Stonewell's revenue increased the value of his interest. Either way, that statement now needed explanation. Leah asked. Did Martin Keats provide an opinion on Colin's authority? A limited opinion letter. She reviewed it. Again, careful language. Keats did not guarantee Colin's authority. He said there was a reasonable basis for reliance on the physician certifications and Colin's alternate agent status given the circumstances. Melissa looked at Leah. We were told you were unavailable and had not undertaken the role. I was never formally requested. That was not our understanding. Who told you otherwise? Colin. Again. The story was narrowing around him. Not the doctors. Not North Coast. Not my parents. Not necessarily Keats. Each may have made mistakes. But Colin was the person feeding different institutions the facts they needed to accept his authority. Leah said. We should work toward a standstill while records are reviewed. Melissa nodded. That is our preference. Good. Nobody wanted unnecessary litigation. North Coast had loaned real money. Mercer Civil had received real benefit from some of it. We were not going to pretend the company owed nothing. But future draws would stop until authority and expenditures were verified. The bridge facility would remain in place. Sarah would control company operations. Any Stonewell draw would require independent approval. Exactly what should have happened from the beginning. At 4:30, I met Colin. Not because I invited him. He was waiting outside Mercer Civil Works. No Bryce. No lawyer. Just my brother leaning against the hood of his car. I almost drove past. Then I stopped. Leah stayed in her vehicle 20 yards away. I walked over. What? Colin looked exhausted. You went to North Coast. Yes. You're freezing the facility. No. His expression changed. We're freezing questionable draws. That's the same thing. No. Harbor Ridge needs equipment. Then legitimate equipment costs will be paid. You don't understand what I had to do while you were gone. I looked at him. Then explain. He laughed bitterly. You disappear. His voice rose. The Coast Guard says your boat sank. Everyone looks at me. Mom can't function. Dad stops answering calls. Natalie is calling every night. Sarah won't make decisions outside her lane. The board wants certainty. Banks want signatures. Vendors want guarantees. And everybody keeps asking what Adrian would do. There it was. For the first time, not money. Pressure. Real pressure. I believe that part. Colin continued. I spent my whole life hearing what Adrian would do. His eyes were red. Then you were gone, and they still asked. I said nothing. So I did something. You created Stonewell. Yes. Before I disappeared. He stopped. There. Timing. I stepped closer. Stonewell was formed 2 weeks before the accident. Silence. So this wasn't an emergency response. No. Why did you create it? He looked away. I wanted my own business. That, by itself, made sense. Why with Bryce? He had equipment contacts. Why hide it from Mercer Civil? Because you would have blocked it. Because Bryce had already inflated vendor pricing. You never forgave anyone. That's not the issue. It is to me. He looked back. I knew you'd say no before I asked. The sentence landed strangely. Not because it excused him. Because it sounded like every bad decision I had heard for 2 days. They assumed I would refuse. So they skipped asking. Family property. Company authority. Vendor conflicts. My consent kept disappearing because people decided in advance what I would say. I asked. Did you plan to sell Stonewell services to Mercer Civil before I disappeared? Yes. Did you tell anyone? No. Why? Because I wanted to prove it worked first. There it was. Not yet a scheme built around my death. A side business he knew I would reject. Then I disappeared. Opportunity changed. What happened after the accident? Colin looked toward the building. Bryce said we could solve the equipment issue. And make money. Yes. At least he admitted it. How much did you personally receive? Nothing. Nothing? Stonewell hasn't distributed profit. That could be checked. Where is the $5 million? His jaw tightened. Deposits. Brokerage fees. Equipment commitments. How much? I don't know exactly. You own 40%. I don't run the books. Convenient. Bryce does? Yes. That worried me. I asked. Did you tell North Coast you owned Stonewell? Colin's face changed. No. Bryce told me he disclosed it. He didn't. Another contradiction. Why not? Colin looked away. Because the lender might have rejected the draw. There. Simple. He knew the information mattered. He withheld it because it could change the answer. Not theft. Not proof of criminal fraud by itself. But intent to avoid scrutiny. I asked. Did you tell the board? No. Same reason? Yes. My anger sharpened. You signed a certification saying the draw did not benefit you personally. I didn't take cash. You own the recipient. It was for Mercer Civil's equipment. That does not make your ownership irrelevant. He slammed a fist against his car. I saved the project. Maybe. What does that mean? It means if Stonewell actually secured valuable equipment at a fair price, Mercer Civil received value. He looked surprised. I continued. That still doesn't excuse hiding your interest. He stared at me. For once, I was not accusing him of stealing $5 million. Because I did not know that yet. I was accusing him of what the evidence already proved. Conflict. Concealment. Unauthorized authority. That was enough. Then I asked. What about the estate petition? His face closed again. Different issue. No. It is. You proposed controlling Mercer Civil. Temporarily. Your own company was receiving millions from it. Silence. That connected the two issues in a way I had not fully appreciated. If I stayed missing long enough for Colin to control my business through an estate role, Stonewell would have a customer whose decision-maker was also its 40% owner. A perfect conflict. Maybe that was why he wanted control. Maybe it was only one reason. But now there was a direct financial incentive. I asked. Did you tell Keats about Stonewell? No. Your parents? No. Natalie? No. So when you proposed yourself as temporary manager of my estate and business interests, nobody knew you had a private company already selling services to Mercer Civil. He said nothing. That silence was enough. My phone rang. Sarah. I answered. What? We found Stonewell's first equipment deposit. My eyes stayed on Colin. How much? 600,000. Recipient? East Shore Heavy. That was legitimate. Next. 420,000 to Calder Marine. Also plausible. Then Sarah stopped. What? 2.8 million went somewhere else. My chest tightened. Where? Stonewell transferred it to CJM Ventures 2 days after receiving the first Mercer payment. I stared at Colin. He froze. Not surprise. Recognition. 2.8 million? Yes. Purpose? Intercompany note repayment. I lowered the phone. CJM Ventures. Colin's company. His wholly controlled entity. Stonewell received $3.6 million from Mercer Civil. Within 48 hours, $2.8 million went to Colin's company as repayment of an intercompany note. Maybe the note was real. Maybe he had legitimately funded Stonewell before. But now the question changed dramatically. Mercer Civil money had not merely increased the value of his ownership. Most of the first payment had flowed directly into an entity he controlled. I looked at my brother. His face had gone gray. Tell me, I said quietly. Colin swallowed. It was repayment. For what? Startup capital. How much did you put into Stonewell? He did not answer. Colin. 3 million. From where? My line of credit. So you borrowed 3 million to fund Stonewell? Yes. Then used my company's payment to repay yourself. It was a legitimate debt. Maybe. His eyes flashed. It was. Then you should have disclosed it. He said nothing. That was the point. A legitimate note did not excuse an undisclosed related party transfer. If anything, it made the conflict clearer. He needed Mercer Civil to pay Stonewell so Stonewell could repay him. And while I was missing, he had gained the authority to make that happen. I looked at him. For the first time since walking into my funeral, the real shape of his urgency appeared. Stonewell had not simply become an opportunity after I disappeared. It had already put Colin personally at risk before the boat ever sank. He owed money. Stonewell owed him. Stonewell needed revenue. And Mercer Civil was the customer big enough to solve the problem. I asked, when was your personal credit line due? He looked away. Colin. Last week. There it was. If I had returned a month earlier, Stonewell might never have received enough money to repay him. If I had returned a week later, the estate petition might have been filed. My brother did not cause my disappearance. Nothing suggested that. He did not know I would vanish at sea. But when I did, my absence solved a problem he already had. That was more believable than murder. And somehow more disappointing. He had been handed a family tragedy. Then looked at it and saw liquidity. I stepped back. You didn't need me dead. His face changed. What? You just needed me gone long enough. That's not fair. No. I nodded. It isn't. Then I walked toward Leah's car. Behind me, Colin called. Adrian. I stopped. You think you know everything now? I looked back. No. That was the difference between us. I know enough to stop letting you make decisions with my name. His face hardened. Then he said, ask Dad where the first 3 million came from. I went completely still. What? Colin smiled bitterly. Not triumphantly. Desperately. The money I used to capitalize CJM. My chest tightened. What about it? I didn't borrow it from a bank. He opened his car door. Ask Dad. Then he drove away. I stood in the parking lot watching him disappear. Leah stepped out of her car. What did he say? I looked toward the road. For 2 days, the evidence had been narrowing toward Colin. Now he had pointed one piece back into my family. I did not know whether he was telling the truth. I did know one thing. I was done believing anyone just because they shared my last name. My father denied it twice. The third time, he stopped looking at me. That was how I knew Colin had not been bluffing. We were sitting in my parents' kitchen less than an hour after I left Mercer Civil Works. Mom was upstairs. Natalie had gone home. Leah sat at the far end of the table with her laptop closed. Not recording. Not interrogating. Just present because I no longer had private financial conversations with family members who might later remember them differently. Dad had poured himself coffee. He had not touched it. I asked again. Where did Colin get the $3 million he used to capitalize CJM Ventures? Dad stared at the mug. I helped him. How? I gave him the money. From where? Silence. Dad. He rubbed both hands over his face. An investment account. Yours? Another hesitation. That was the problem. The answer should have been immediate. I looked at Leah. She said nothing. Good. This was still my question. Whose account? Dad finally looked at me. Mine and your mother's. I felt some tension leave my shoulders. Not all. At least legally. His expression changed. And the tension came back. What does that mean? I asked. He exhaled. You funded it. There it was. I leaned back. Not theft. Not yet. I had funded several accounts for my parents over the years. After Dad's stroke, I purchased the Portland Income Properties and placed them in an LLC I owned, with a management agreement directing most net income to my parents during their lifetimes. Separately, I gave them cash. Real gifts. Once given, theirs. If Dad had invested his own money in Colin, that was bad judgment perhaps. Not misuse of my estate. How much of the 3 million was money I had already gifted you? All of it. Then legally it was yours. Dad looked surprised. You're not angry? I didn't say that. I leaned forward. But I want the rest. He looked down again. Colin came to me 4 months ago. Before Stonewell existed. Before my accident. He said he had an opportunity. With Bryce. I didn't know Bryce was involved at first. What did Colin tell you? That he could create an equipment company serving contractors who were getting squeezed by shortages. Plausible. And you gave him $3 million? It wasn't supposed to be permanent. There was that word again. Temporary. Every disaster in my family apparently began with something temporary. He promised to repay you? In 90 days. With interest? Yes. How much? 8%. For 90 days. That was unusually generous. Not impossible. Enough that Dad should have asked why Colin needed money badly enough to pay it. Did you? Did I what? Ask why a business with such a good opportunity couldn't get ordinary financing. Dad became defensive. He was starting from nothing. So? Banks don't like startups. Banks especially don't like startups promising 8% in 90 days. He said nothing. What collateral? He personally guaranteed it. I almost laughed. With what? Dad's face tightened. His North Star. He stopped. Wrong company. We were Mercer Civil Works, not North Star. He corrected. His own investments. His condo. Whatever he had. So nothing close to $3 million. No. And Mom knew? Silence. There it was. No, I said. Dad looked miserable. I was going to tell her after he repaid it. Of course. After. When the risk disappeared and only the successful result remained. Everyone loved transparency after uncertainty was gone. I asked. Was that money your retirement reserve? He looked away. Most of it. That was the part Colin wanted me to discover. My father had not merely invested in his son. He had put most of my parents' liquid security behind him. Then I disappeared. And suddenly Colin needed Stonewell to generate enough cash to repay the note before Mom discovered what Dad had done. The funeral did not create the pressure. It revealed it. Leah finally spoke. Richard, did Colin tell you Mercer Civil Works would become a Stonewell customer? Dad looked at her. Yes. When? After Adrian disappeared. How long after? Maybe a week. My stomach tightened. Before Stonewell's first invoice. What exactly did he say? Dad thought. That Mercer was having equipment problems and Stonewell could solve them. Did he tell you he would be acting on Mercer Civil's behalf? He said he was helping manage things until Adrian was found. Did he tell you he intended to approve payments from Mercer to Stonewell? No. Important. Did he tell you he owned 40% of Stonewell? Yes. Also important. Dad knew the ownership. Just not the self-approval. Did you tell anyone at Mercer Civil? No. Why? He looked at me now. Because I didn't think it was my business. I almost laughed. You put $3 million into it. I meant company governance. He was technically right. Still irresponsible. Then I asked the question that had been bothering me since Colin told me to ask Dad. Why did you support him taking control of my business? Dad's expression changed. I didn't. You signed the family memorandum. I thought it let him coordinate things. You supported the estate petition discussions. I thought somebody needed to be available. Why Colin? Silence. There. I waited. Dad rubbed his thumb against the coffee mug. Then finally said. Because if Stonewell failed, your mother and I were in trouble. At least he said it. No excuse. No euphemism. Just truth. $3 million. Retirement security. Dad needed Colin's business to survive. And when I disappeared, the quickest path to Stonewell survival ran through Mercer Civil Works. My company. I stared at him. So when you said Colin was trying to save Mercer Civil, I believed he was. Did you also know Mercer Civil paying Stonewell helped protect your $3 million? Yes. The answer came quietly. It still hit hard. Did you disclose that when Sarah or the board discussed Stonewell? I wasn't in those meetings. That's not what I asked. No. There it was. Not a conspiracy. A conflict. My father had a financial reason to want Stonewell successful. He did not create the contract. He did not sign the draw requests. He did not fake my authority. But when Colin told the family he needed control to keep everything stable, Dad had reason not to ask too many questions. That changed how I understood the funeral. Mom's grief was real. Natalie's grief was real. Dad's grief was real too. But mixed into his was fear. If I was truly dead, Mercer Civil's future became uncertain. If Mercer Civil stopped paying Stonewell, Stonewell might fail. If Stonewell failed, Colin could not repay Dad. And my parents' retirement reserve could disappear. So when Colin said, "Let me manage things," Dad heard, "Your money might still come back." That was not the same as wanting me dead. It was still enough to compromise judgment. I stood. Dad looked at me. "What are you going to do?" "About what?" "The $3 million. It's your money." His face changed. "You're not going to make Colin repay it? I'm not your collection agency. Adrian. You made the loan. He's your brother. And you're an adult." The words sounded harsh. They were necessary. The old version of me would have fixed it. Written Mom and Dad a check. Then gone after Colin. Everyone protected. Adrian absorbs the gap. "No. Not this time. If Colin owes you money, Leah can refer you to independent counsel." Dad looked stunned. "You'd let your mother lose her retirement?" "No." I shook my head. "I'm letting you deal with a financial decision you made without telling her. That's the same thing." "It isn't." His voice rose. "You have the money." There it was. The real family expectation. Not Colin's. Dad's. You have the money. Therefore consequences are optional for everyone else. I looked at him. "You still receive income from the Portland properties." "Yes, but..." "You have the house." "Yes." "You have Social Security, retirement accounts, and the remaining cash reserve." "We're not broke." "Then stop describing this like Mom will be homeless." He went silent. "You took a serious risk." I continued. "It may cost you." "That doesn't mean I don't care." His face tightened. "Then what does caring look like?" "Helping you understand your options." I paused. "Not writing a check so nobody learns anything." He stared at me for a long time. Then looked away. For once, he had no argument. The next morning, the Stonewell Bank records arrived voluntarily through Bryce's attorney. That surprised me. It should not have. Bryce had his own problem now. Colin had told me Stonewell's books were Bryce's responsibility. Bryce clearly had no intention of being the only man holding the bag. Leah, Sarah, Evan Ross, and I met in Mercer Civil's boardroom. No family. Only people with defined roles. Evan summarized the cash flow. Stonewell received $5 million from Mercer Civil and North Coast draws. Of that, $600,000 went to Eastshore Heavy, $420,000 to Calder Marine, $310,000 to Marine Transport Deposits, $190,000 to insurance, legal fees, and setup costs. Reasonable enough. Then, $2.8 million to CJM Ventures as repayment of Colin's startup note. Another $340,000 to a brokerage company controlled by Bryce. And approximately $340,000 remained in Stonewell's accounts. Sarah stared at the page. "So less than a third of our money was used to secure actual equipment." "Correct," Evan said. "Yet Stonewell wants another $2.4 million cancellation fee." "Yes." She laughed without humor. "For equipment they barely reserved. That is what we'll challenge." I asked. "What about the $2.8 million repayment?" Leah answered carefully. If the underlying note was legitimate, Stonewell could repay it. Even with Mercer Civil's money? Companies repay investors and creditors all the time. But Colin approved the customer payment that funded his own repayment. Yes. That's the issue. Exactly. Related party transaction. Undisclosed conflict. Potential breach of fiduciary duty depending on what authority he legally held. Possibly false certifications to North Coast. We did not need to inflate it. The facts were serious enough. Sarah leaned back. "Could we have sourced the equipment directly?" "Yes," Evan said. "At what cost?" He handed her a comparison. Estimated direct vendor commitments for equivalent access. $2.90 to $3.40 million. Stonewell contract value, including claimed termination exposure. Up to $7.4 million. More than double. My anger sharpened. Not because a markup was automatically improper. Brokers earned margins. But the markup existed in a transaction Colin concealed from his own board while simultaneously benefiting from repayment. Did Stonewell add enough value to justify the difference? Evan shrugged. That would be litigated if necessary. Fair. Again. No instant conclusion. At 11, Bryce requested a meeting. This time we agreed. He arrived with counsel. Colin did not. That told me the partnership was already breaking. Bryce sat across from us. I'm prepared to waive Stonewell's $2.4 million termination invoice. Sarah almost laughed. How generous. His attorney gave her a look. Bryce continued. In exchange, Mercer Civil recognizes prior payments as earned and releases Stonewell from additional claims. No, Leah said. Immediate. Bryce frowned. You haven't heard the proposal. We heard enough. His attorney stepped in. Stonewell provided real value. We're not denying that, Evan said. Then what do you want? Accounting. Silence. Vendor contracts. Deposits. Bank records. Ownership disclosures. Communication surrounding the Mercer engagement. Bryce looked at me. You want to drag this out? No. I leaned forward. I want to know how much value my company received for $5 million. His face tightened. You got Harbor Ridge protected. Sarah answered. Harbor Ridge was never in immediate default. Because we acted. No. Because the project wasn't in default. Bryce looked irritated. Then he said. Colin told us Adrian's death would trigger a management crisis. The room went quiet. My death. Not disappearance. Before I was declared dead? He stopped. Too late. I asked. When did Colin say that? Bryce looked at his lawyer. The lawyer whispered something. Then Bryce answered carefully. 12 days after the accident. My pulse slowed. 12 days. Before the Coast Guard suspended the search. Before the funeral. Before any draft estate petition. I was still officially missing. What exactly did he say? Bryce hesitated. Then. He said if you didn't come back, he would probably control Mercer Civil during the estate transition. Sarah stared at him. Probably. He believed the family would support him. Did he mention Adrian's will? No. Independent trustee? No. Of course not. Bryce continued. That mattered to Stonewell. Why? Because we were trying to raise financing. There it was. Stonewell needed credit. A guaranteed large customer would help. And Colin told potential lenders he might control Mercer Civil? Bryce said nothing. His attorney intervened. We're not here to discuss third-party financing representations. That was effectively an answer. I looked at Leah. She wrote one line. Stonewell was not merely Colin's side business. He had used the possibility of controlling my company after my death as part of Stonewell's commercial story while I was still missing. That was why the estate petition mattered financially. Not just family ego. Not just wanting my chair. If Colin became temporary administrator or controlled Mercer Civil, Stonewell's relationship with my company became far more secure. Which strengthened Stonewell. Which protected his $3 million obligation to Dad. Which protected Colin personally. The pieces finally connected. Not a murder plot. Not some absurd scheme causing my boat accident. Something more realistic. My accidental disappearance created a financial opportunity. And Colin moved faster than grief should have allowed because he was already overleveraged. Bryce left without a deal. By afternoon, Mercer Civil's independent directors called an emergency board session. I attended. Colin did too, remotely, with counsel. Evelyn Park spoke first. Colin, did you disclose your ownership in Stonewell before directing company business toward it? No. Did you disclose that Stonewell owed CJM Ventures approximately $3 million? No. Did you disclose to North Coast that you benefited from Stonewell's repayment of that note? No. His attorney interrupted. My client disputes the characterization of personal benefit. Evelyn nodded. Noted. No drama. She continued. Did you tell Stonewell's principals that you expected to control Mercer Civil if Adrian did not return? Colin looked directly at me through the screen. His expression changed. He knew Bryce had talked. I said it was possible. On what basis? The family supported me. Did you know Adrian's will placed company shares under independent fiduciary control? Silence. There. The first clean question about his knowledge. Evelyn repeated it. Did you know? Yes. My father had not known the details. Bryce had not known. Martin Keats had not known. Colin had. Yet he still built his plan around controlling Mercer Civil. Then why tell Stonewall you expected control? He leaned forward. Because wills can be administered in different ways. That is not an answer. I thought the family could petition. To override Adrian's estate plan? To protect the company. Again. Always protect. Evelyn looked at him for several seconds. Then said. Effective immediately, the board rejects any authority you purport to exercise for Mercer Civil Works. Colin's attorney began to object. She continued. All company dealings with Stonewall are suspended pending review. Any further participation by Colin in vendor, financing, or estate-related decisions affecting Mercer Civil requires independent board approval. Then she looked at me. Adrian, your return does not automatically resolve every action taken during your absence. I know. The company will investigate independently. Good. That answer mattered. I did not want my authority restored merely because I walked through a funeral door. I wanted governance to work. Even when the person benefiting was me. After the meeting, Colin called. I answered. What? You talked to Dad? Yes. He told you everything? Enough. Silence. Then. You're going to let him lose the money. That's between you and him. You can cover it. There it was again. Same family language. Different mouth. You can. I almost smiled. Apparently that's everyone's favorite argument. What? Adrian can survive it. He went quiet. I continued. Dad can risk $3 million because Adrian can replace it. Mercer Civil can overpay Stonewall because Adrian will fix the company. You can take authority because Adrian might be dead. And if I come back? I paused. Adrian will clean it up. His voice sharpened. I never said that. You didn't have to. For years, my family had treated competence like an insurance policy. I was the one who could absorb problems. Money. Business. Parents. Natalie's divorce. Colin's failed ventures. Everyone loved me. I believed that. But love had slowly become dependent on my reliability. And reliability became availability. Then entitlement. Colin said. I was trying not to lose everything. There it was. Finally. Not save Mercer Civil. Not honor me. Not protect family. His own fear. Your $3 million. My business. Dad's money. My future. Yes. He breathed hard. You have no idea what it's like always knowing if your thing fails. Everyone says Adrian was right. I closed my eyes. There was the oldest wound. Comparison. Again. Maybe Colin did not want my death. Maybe he never even consciously wanted my company. But when I vanished, the universe gave him a chance to build a version of reality where his business survived because he controlled mine. And he took it. I said. Then you should have built something that could survive without me disappearing. He said nothing. I ended the call. That evening, I returned to the Whitmore Hotel. The ballroom was empty now. The staff had removed most of the flowers. The casket company had collected the empty coffin. But the giant memorial portrait still leaned against a wall waiting for pickup. My own face watched me cross the room. I stopped in front of it. 38 days. That was all Colin needed. Not to steal my estate outright. Not to become some cartoon heir. Just to start rearranging the world around the assumption I was not coming back. The family funeral had been sincere. The grief was real. The toast was real. So was the financial plan underneath it. That was the part one finally understood. My family did not hold my funeral because they wanted my money. But Colin used the funeral because it made his authority look natural. Everyone was already saying goodbye to Adrian. So when he stepped forward and said, I'll take care of things, nobody asked enough questions. Except now I was alive. And questions were exactly what he had left behind. On my way out, Leah called. We have a response from Colin's attorney. To what? The preservation demand for his estate planning communications. I stopped. And? They're asserting privilege over communications with Martin Keats. Can they? Some, potentially. I kept walking. What's important? He also produced a non-privileged email voluntarily. Why? His lawyer thinks it helps him. That interested me. What does it say? Leah read it. An email Colin sent Martin 12 days before my funeral. If Adrian is declared dead, I need temporary control of Mercer Civil immediately. A delayed transition could jeopardize Stonewall commitments and family capital already at risk. I stopped in the hotel lobby. Family capital. Stonewell commitments. There it was. In his own words. Before the funeral. Before the toast. Before the cards saying as Adrian wished. My brother had linked control of my estate to protecting his private business and my parents' money. His attorney thought the email helped because it showed a financial motive to preserve value rather than steal it. Maybe legally, in some respects, it did. For me, it did something else. It removed the last ambiguity about why Colin moved so fast. He had mourned me. I did not doubt that anymore. But while the rest of my family was planning a funeral, my brother was planning liquidity. The email changed the board's posture. Not because it proved Colin intended to steal my estate. It didn't. Not because it proved Stonewell was fake. It wasn't. It proved something narrower. More useful. While I was still missing, Colin had already connected 3 things in writing. My presumed death. Control of Mercer Civil Works. And protection of Stonewell. That was enough to stop treating the estate petition, the bridge financing, and the Stonewell contract as separate mistakes. They were one chain. The next morning, Mercer Civil's independent directors retained outside investigative counsel. Not Leah. Not Evan Ross. Someone with no prior relationship to me, Colin, or the company. Her name was Marissa Cole. Former federal prosecutor. Now a corporate investigations partner. She began the first meeting with a sentence I liked immediately. I am not here to prove Adrian right. Colin's attorney looked almost disappointed. Marissa continued. I am here to determine what authority was used, what conflicts existed, what disclosures were made, what value Mercer Civil received, and what remedial action is necessary. Good. No family drama. No funeral emotion. Just sequence. She requested 4 categories of material. Colin's communications with Stonewell and Bryce. All North Coast Draw certifications. Board communications during my disappearance. And financial records showing where Stonewell funds moved after receipt. Then she added. We are not going to review every argument the Mercer brothers ever had. Colin looked at me. I did not react. The investigation has one central issue. She turned toward him. Did Colin use disputed emergency authority over Mercer Civil to direct company funds toward an undisclosed related party business from which he personally benefited? There it was. The entire story narrowed into one sentence. Everything else became context. Colin's attorney objected to the word benefited. Marissa changed it immediately. Fine. From which an entity controlled by Colin received repayment. Better. Facts. Not labels. I was beginning to understand how much stronger a case became when nobody exaggerated it. Colin leaned forward. I already told Adrian the CJM transfer was repayment of legitimate startup funding. Marissa nodded. I've seen the note. That surprised him. You have? Stonewell produced it. She placed the document on screen. $3 million. CJM Ventures to Stonewell Equipment Holdings. Executed 9 weeks ago. Interest rate. 8% annualized. Maturity. 90 days. Security. Substantially all Stonewell receivables. On paper, real. Not invented after the fact. That mattered. I looked at my father, who had joined with his own counsel because his money funded CJM. He looked almost relieved. Then Marissa said. The note being real does not resolve the conflict issue. Relief disappeared. Exactly. A valid debt could still be repaid through an undisclosed self-dealing transaction. Colin said. Stonewell owed CJM. Yes. It had the money. Yes. So it paid. Yes. He spread his hands. Then what are we doing here? Marissa looked at him. Determining whether Mercer Civil would have paid Stonewell $5 million on the terms it did if its board, lender, and COO knew you were both approving the customer-side transaction and positioned to receive most of the proceeds through CJM. Silence. That was the question. Not whether Stonewell had a note. Whether the transaction survived sunlight. The first answer came from pricing. Evan had completed a direct market comparison. Stonewell's initial Mercer package required $5 million upfront and potentially another $2.4 million upon cancellation. Comparable equipment reservations from established vendors would likely have required between $2.9 million and $3.6 million in deposits and mobilization commitments. Stonewell did provide some coordination value. It arranged one rig faster than our existing vendors. It found marine transport capacity during a crowded construction window. There was real work. Marissa asked Sarah. Would Mercer Civil have rejected Stonewell entirely if Colin disclosed his interest? Sarah thought before answering. Not necessarily. That surprised Colin. And me. She continued. If Stonewell had the best package, we could have used it. What would change? Independent bidding. Conflict disclosure. Board approval. Cost comparison. No Colin participation. Exactly. The problem was not that a company related to Colin could never do business with Mercer Civil. The problem was that he hid the relationship and bypassed the process designed to test whether Mercer Civil was getting a fair deal. Marissa asked. In your judgment, did the company overpay? Yes. How much? Not ready to say. Good. No invented number. The next issue was authority. This was Messier. Leah's POA was not obviously activated correctly. But North Coast had relied on physician letters and legal advice. Colin had used that disputed authority. Could every contract he signed be declared void? No. Evan explained why. Third parties could sometimes rely on apparent or asserted authority depending on the facts. Mercer Civil had also received actual benefit from some transactions. Courts did not erase real obligations casually. Colin seemed encouraged by that. He should not have been. Because Marissa was less interested in whether the entire bridge facility vanished than in what Colin told people while obtaining it. North Coast produced its underwriting notes. One sentence stood out. Authorized representative states no undisclosed related party beneficiaries associated with proposed restricted account draws. Marissa looked at Colin. Did you make that representation? His attorney answered first. My client does not recall the precise language used orally. Marissa nodded. Fair. Then she displayed the written draw certification. Signed by Colin. No requested expenditure is for the personal benefit of the authorized agent or any undisclosed affiliate. There was no ambiguity in that sentence. Marissa asked. Was CJM Ventures your affiliate? Yes. Was its interest disclosed to North Coast? No. Was Stonewell's ownership disclosed? No. Did the first $3.6 million draw lead to a $2.8 million payment to CJM? Yes. Colin's attorney interrupted. Again, as repayment of a valid obligation. Marissa nodded. Noted. Then she looked back at Colin. My question is narrower. Why did you certify no undisclosed affiliate benefit when an undisclosed affiliate was owed nearly $3 million by the recipient? Colin did not answer immediately. Then, I interpreted benefit to mean distributions or improper personal payments. Marissa wrote that down. Not mocking. Not arguing. Did anyone give you that interpretation? No. Did you ask North Coast? No. Did you ask company counsel? No. There. Maybe not criminal intent. Definitely reckless interpretation in his own favor. The estate petition came next. This was where the investigation changed from corporate misconduct to motive. Marissa had reconstructed a timeline. Day 1. I disappeared. Day 8. Stonewell's capital became fully funded through CJM. Day 12. Colin told Bryce he expected to control Mercer Civil if I did not return. Day 19. Colin first discussed emergency estate authority with Martin Keats. Day 22. Colin presented Stonewell to Mercer Civil as urgent equipment support. Day 25. Mercer Board challenged his authority and related pricing. Day 26. North Coast Bridge facility closed. Day 27. First Stonewell draw. Day 29. $2.8 million flowed to CJM. Day 32. Colin proposed himself as temporary estate administrator. Day 34. The family transition memorandum was revised to give him broader authority language. Day 37. Funeral. Day 38. I walked in during the toast. Nobody spoke after Marissa finished. Sequence did what anger could not. It removed excuses one by one. She turned to Colin. You did not cause Adrian's disappearance. No. No evidence suggests you expected it. No. Stonewell existed before the accident. Yes. You already had financial exposure through CJM. Yes. Then Adrian disappeared. Yes. Marissa paused. And that disappearance created a path for you to direct Mercer Civil business towards Stonewell, repay CJM, protect family capital, and potentially obtain longer-term control over Mercer Civil if Adrian was declared dead. Colin's attorney objected. That combines multiple disputed intentions. Marissa nodded. You're right. Then she changed the sentence. Those outcomes became possible. That was stronger. Because it did not require mind reading. Possible. Documented. Then she asked Colin directly. When did you first realize Adrian's absence could solve Stonewall's liquidity problem? The room went still. He looked at me. Not Marissa. Me. For several seconds, I thought he would deny the premise. Instead he said. About 10 days in. My father closed his eyes. There it was. Not at the funeral. Not after everyone had given up hope. 10 days. The Coast Guard was still searching. My mother was still calling hospitals. Natalie was still leaving voicemails. And Colin had already started seeing business consequences. Marissa asked. What did you do with that realization? He looked down. Nothing immediately. Then? I started thinking about what happened if Adrian didn't come back. That is reasonable by itself. Colin looked surprised. She continued. Companies need contingency planning. Yes. So what changed? His face tightened. I realized Mercer would still need equipment. And Stonewall could provide it. Yes. And Stonewall needed revenue. Yes. And CJM needed repayment. Yes. And your father had funded CJM. Yes. The room grew heavier with every answer. Marissa asked. Did those factors influence your decision to push Stonewall? Long silence. Then. Yes. My father looked away. No one moved. There it was. Not fraud confession. Not theft confession. Motive. Current. Specific. He wanted Mercer Civil to use Stonewall partly because Stonewall needed Mercer Civil. That circular dependence was exactly why conflict policies existed. Marissa ended the formal interview shortly after. Colin asked to speak with me alone. Leah said no. I surprised her. 5 minutes. She frowned. Adrian. Door open. That was my compromise. Colin and I stood in the empty boardroom while everyone else waited in the hall. For once, he looked less angry than exhausted. You got what you wanted. I almost smiled. You sound like Dad. What do you want me to say? The truth has been working. He looked at the table. Then at me. I did grieve you. I know. You keep acting like I was sitting around hoping you were dead. I don't think that. His expression changed. You don't? No. That seemed to hurt more. Because he had prepared to defend himself against an accusation I was not making. I think you believed I was probably gone. He swallowed. And then you started making decisions. Yes. Some for the company. Yes. Some for Stonewall. Yes. Some for yourself. He stared at me. Then. Yes. There it was. No lawyer. No board. Just two brothers. I asked. When you proposed controlling Mercer Civil through the estate, was it because of Stonewall? He sat down. Partly. How partly? He laughed bitterly. You always need percentages. No. I need to know what I'm dealing with. He rubbed his face. Stonewall was bleeding. How bad? Worse than Bryce admitted. That caught me. What do you mean? We had reserved equipment before we had customers. How much? Too much. Dollar amount. About 4.6 million in commitments if everything triggered. My chest tightened. That explained the termination invoice. Stonewall had taken obligations before securing enough customers. You had only 3 million capital. Yes. So if Mercer Civil didn't become a major customer, we were dead. He stopped. The word hung there. Dead. Wrong word. Right meaning. He continued. Dad would lose his money. I'd default on the CJM note structure. Bryce would walk. I'd be finished. And when I disappeared? He looked at me. You had the biggest project in the region and a company that needed equipment. There it was. My absence did not create the business idea. It removed the person most likely to reject it. I asked. If I had come back before the first payment, what would you have done? He took too long. That was answer enough. Still I waited. Finally. I would have tried to convince you. And if I said no? His jaw tightened. I don't know. Yes, you do. He looked away. You would have stopped it. Probably. And Stonewall? Maybe failed. Dad's money? At risk? Yes. He gave a small, humorless laugh. So there. There what? That's why nobody likes when you're right. I stared at him. That sentence told me more about our relationship than anything else. To Colin, my refusal was not merely a business judgment. It was a verdict on him. Every no from me became proof he was the lesser brother. That was why he avoided asking. If he never asked, he never had to hear it. Instead, he used my absence to create his own yes. Before he left, I asked one final question. The funeral toast. He stopped. What about it? You said everything I built would stay with the people I loved. His face tightened. Mom wanted something hopeful. The property cards? Mostly symbolic. Mostly? He looked embarrassed now. I wanted people to see there was continuity. For the family? For the company too. There. Public legitimacy. Did you think employees or lenders would hear about it? Yes. So the funeral was also signaling. He became angry again. You make everything sound calculated. Because some of it was. He looked toward the hall. Then said quietly. I needed people to believe things weren't falling apart. I nodded. I understand. He looked surprised. Then I finished. You just decided the easiest way to create stability was to put yourself in the center of everything. He had no answer. The board issued interim findings 2 days later. Colin was barred from any role at Mercer Civil Works. The company would pursue recovery against Stonewell for amounts unsupported by documented value. North Coast agreed to restructure the bridge facility under Sarah's authority rather than accelerate it. Stonewell's cancellation claim remained disputed. And the board authorized negotiations to recover the portion of payments tied to undisclosed related party benefit. No police waiting outside. No instant criminal charges. Corporate remedies first. Exactly where the strongest evidence lived. My father hired separate counsel to pursue repayment of his $3 million loan from Colin. He did not ask me for a check. That was progress. Natalie returned the Rangeley property card from the funeral. I told her to throw it away. She kept it. Why? To remind me never to inherit someone who's still breathing. I laughed for the first time since coming home. That helped. Then Stonewell collapsed. Not theatrically. Its main financing source withdrew after learning about the undisclosed Mercer relationship. Bryce refused to add capital. Several equipment commitments came due. Within 3 weeks, Stonewell entered a negotiated wind down. The company still had assets. Deposits. Claims. Receivables. Not enough. CJM recovered only part of its remaining note. My father was going to lose money. Probably a lot. Colin would too. That was not my revenge. It was the business result of a company that had been built with too little capital, too much leverage, and one customer relationship that never should have been approved the way it was. I did not celebrate. I had lost enough things at sea to stop enjoying collapse. The evening after Stonewell announced its wind down, Mom asked me to dinner. Colin was not there. Dad looked exhausted. But different. He had finally told Mom about the $3 million. That conversation had apparently been worse than any board meeting. Mom looked at me across the table. Your father thought you would fix it. Dad closed his eyes. Elaine. What? She should know. Mom looked back at me. I thought so too. There it was. Not accusation. Admission. Why? She looked ashamed. Because you always do. I said nothing. She continued. When Natalie got divorced, you found the lawyer. When Dad got sick, you arranged everything. When Colin's first business failed, you paid the tax debt. When Mercer had problems, you stayed up all night. Her eyes filled. I think we stopped noticing the difference between you helping and you owing us help. That was the sentence. The one underneath everything. My funeral. The property cards. Dad's investment. Colin's authority. All of it had grown in soil fertilized by one family habit. Adrian handles it. I looked at my parents. I'm still going to help. Mom started crying. But not by erasing what happened. She nodded. Dad did too. That was enough. Later that night, Leah called. We received the final Stonewell accounting package. Anything new? One thing. I waited. Bryce's records show Colin asked him to delay one equipment cancellation notice until after the funeral. My expression hardened. Why? So Stonewell would appear fully committed during discussions with potential lenders. I closed my eyes. The funeral again. Not grief alone. A deadline. A signal. A financial event. Did Colin know the equipment was already at risk? Yes. Before the toast? Yes. There it was. The final missing piece. While Colin stood beneath my photograph and told everyone everything I built would remain secure, he already knew Stonewall's equipment commitments were beginning to unwind. He was not only toasting continuity. He was trying to manufacture it before the market discovered otherwise. I looked at the dark window. My brother had not planned my death. He had not caused my disappearance. He had not stolen my entire estate. The truth was less sensational. And more believable. He saw an unexpected window. 38 days without me. And he tried to solve every problem in his life before that window closed. Stonewall. Dad's money. Mercer Civil. His own status. The estate. Then I walked into the ballroom during the toast. And the window slammed shut. 3 months after I walked into my own funeral, Colin sat across from Mercer Civil's board and tried to explain why none of what he had done should cost him his future. The hearing was private. No reporters. No extended family. No giant photograph of me. Just 5 directors, outside counsel, Colin and his attorney, Leah, Sarah Fenwick, and me. Marissa Cole had finished her investigation 48 hours earlier. 187 pages. I read every one. Twice. The conclusion was less dramatic than the story my anger had tried to write in the beginning. Colin had not stolen my entire estate. He had not fabricated my death. He had not engineered the boating accident. He had not emptied Mercer Civil's accounts into some offshore vault. What he had done was narrower. And provable. During my disappearance, he used contested emergency authority to place himself inside decisions he had a personal financial interest in. He failed to disclose his ownership of Stonewall. He failed to disclose CJM's right to receive repayment from Stonewall. He signed North Coast certifications that omitted that affiliate benefit. He pushed Mercer Civil into a transaction priced significantly above direct alternatives. He used the possibility of controlling Mercer Civil after my presumed death to strengthen Stonewall's commercial position. And when questions arose, he widened a family planning document so it appeared to give him more authority than counsel had actually recommended. No single fact made the entire story. Together, they did. Marissa began the meeting. Our purpose today is not to decide criminal liability. Same discipline as always. The company is deciding its civil and governance response. Colin's attorney, Samuel Hart, nodded. He was younger than I expected. Calm. Careful. Much better for Colin than someone theatrical would have been. Marissa continued. The independent review found that Mercer Civil received some legitimate value from Stonewall. Colin looked at me. Almost vindicated. Then she added. It also found the transaction would not have been approved on the same terms had Colin's full financial interest been disclosed. That wiped the expression away. Sarah presented the cost comparison. Actual value Mercer received from secured equipment, transport, and coordination was estimated between $1.90 and $2.4 million depending on how certain mobilization services were valued. Mercer and North Coast had paid Stonewall $5 million. Stonewall was now insolvent. Recovery from the company itself would be limited. Which meant the board had to decide what to pursue from Colin and potentially Bryce. Samuel Hart spoke. My client accepts that disclosure should have been better. Sarah's face remained perfectly still. Better. A lawyer's favorite soft word for materially absent. Hart continued. But he rejects the suggestion that he intentionally harmed Mercer Civil. Harbor Ridge remained on schedule. Employees were paid. Vendors were supported. The bridge facility prevented disruption during an unprecedented leadership crisis. Some of that was true. That was what made the case worth hearing. Colin had not spent 38 days doing nothing useful. He had helped. He had spoken to customers. Comforted employees. Handled my parents. Worked with lenders. Made decisions while everyone wondered whether my body would ever be found. Good acts and bad acts lived inside the same month. That did not cancel either side. Marissa asked. Mr. Mercer, if your financial interest in Stonewall had been disclosed, would you have expected independent review? Colin answered quietly. Yes. Why didn't you disclose it? I thought they'd reject the deal automatically. There it was. One sentence. Not confusion. Not oversight. He avoided the process because he feared the answer. Marissa asked, "Did you believe Stonewall was still the best option?" "Yes." "Then why not let the board test that?" His jaw tightened. "Because there wasn't time." Sarah spoke for the first time. "There was." He looked at her. "You don't know that. I was COO. You were afraid to move." "No." Her voice never rose. "I was unwilling to let an emergency become permission to ignore controls." Silence. That was the difference between them. Colin believed urgency made process optional. Sarah believed urgency made process more important. I knew which one I wanted running my company. Then Marissa moved to the family transition memorandum. The original draft appeared on the screen. The associate's revision. Then Colin's final revision. 3 versions. The sentence changing from "coordinate preservation efforts pending proper legal authority" to "authorized to take all actions reasonably necessary." Looked worse when shown side by side. Hart said. The memorandum was explicitly non-binding. Leah answered. Then why broaden the authority language after legal counsel narrowed it? Colin looked at me. I hated that. Every difficult question still made him search my face. As though we were boys again and the real contest was whether Adrian believed him. I kept my expression neutral. He answered. Because the family needed clarity. Leah asked. Did the family ask you to make that change? No. Did Martin Keats? No. Did his associate? No. So you did it yourself? Yes. Why? Colin's voice hardened. Because nobody was making decisions. That's not true. I was there. So was Sarah. She didn't have estate authority. Neither did you. Silence. That was the line. The entire problem reduced again. Colin had mistaken willingness to act for authority to act. Marissa showed the email he had sent Martin Keats before the funeral. A delayed transition could jeopardize Stonewall commitments and family capital already at risk. Then the later Bryce record showing Colin asked for an equipment cancellation notice to be delayed until after my memorial. Marissa asked. Why did the timing of the funeral matter to Stonewall? Colin looked exhausted now. Because Bryce was talking to lenders. And? He wanted stability. What stability? The appearance that Mercer Civil would keep operating. Sarah said. We were always operating. Colin closed his eyes. I know. Then what appearance were you creating? He did not answer. I knew. We all did. Not Mercer Civil continuing. Colin continuing. At the center. At my funeral, the family allocation cards told a simple story. Adrian was gone. Colin had the company. Natalie had the cabin. Mom and Dad had the properties. Life was already reorganized. To a grieving guest, sentimental. To a potential lender hearing about Stonewall's major customer, continuity. Colin finally said. I needed people to believe there wouldn't be a fight. Marissa asked. A fight over what? Control. And you wanted them to believe you would have it. Yes. There. No need to dramatize it. He said yes. The board recessed. I went to the hallway. Colin followed 5 minutes later. His attorney stayed behind. For a moment, it was just us. You must feel great, he said. No. Come on, Adrian. He laughed bitterly. 3 months ago I was standing in your company thinking I finally proved I could handle something without you. I looked at him. And today? Today everyone is calculating what I owe. That tends to happen when money is involved. He shook his head. You still don't get it. Then tell me. His eyes were tired. Not angry anymore. When the Coast Guard called off the search, Mom stopped eating. I know. Dad sat in your office for 6 hours staring at your chair. I said nothing. Natalie kept asking me what happens if payroll fails. That wasn't her responsibility. She didn't know that. He continued. Everyone looked at me. For the first time, they looked at me. There it was. Not just money. Identity. Position. Being needed. You liked it. He stared at the floor. Yes. Honest. Finally. I hated why it happened. His voice broke slightly. But I liked being the one with answers. I believed him. That was the tragedy inside all of it. He did mourn me. And part of him also enjoyed the empty space I left. Both were true. He continued. Then Stonewall worked for 1 week. It paid CJM. Yes. Dad relaxed. Yes. Harbor Ridge kept moving. Yes. And suddenly every decision I made looked right. He laughed once. So I made bigger ones. That was how bad systems grew. Early success. No immediate punishment. People interpreted survival as proof. You changed the memorandum. Yes. You pushed the petition. Yes. You used the funeral to signal continuity. His face tightened. Yes. Why? He looked at me. Because I thought if everyone accepted me in the role before the legal process caught up, nobody would pull me out of it later. There it was. The clearest admission yet. Not theft of ownership. Capture of momentum. He wanted temporary control to become normal through repetition. I asked. And if I had never come back? He looked away. I don't know. Would you have handed Mercer Civil to Pine Harbor Trust when my will was admitted? Long silence. Colin. I don't know. That answer told me enough. Maybe he would have. Maybe he would have fought. Maybe Stonewell's financial needs would have made him rationalize one more delay. The point was that he had already stopped trusting the plan I created for my own death. Because it did not put him where he wanted to be. The board called us back. Evelyn Park read the decision. Mercer Civil would pursue Colin personally for losses attributable to his undisclosed related party conduct, subject to final valuation and settlement. The company would also pursue Stonewell's remaining assets and claims against Bryce where supported. Colin was permanently barred from any officer, director, fiduciary, procurement, or advisory role at Mercer Civil. Any future vendor connected to him required full disclosure and independent approval. The company would not challenge the entire North Coast Bridge loan simply to avoid obligations it had actually benefited from. Instead, Sarah and the lender had negotiated repayment on ordinary commercial terms. That mattered. We would not use Colin's misconduct as an excuse to cheat someone else. Then came the financial part. After weeks of negotiation, the board had agreed to offer Colin a civil settlement. He would repay $2.1 million over time. Not $5 million. Because Mercer Civil had received real value from Stonewell. Not zero. Because the undisclosed conflict had caused real loss. His remaining economic interest in Stonewell's wind down would be assigned toward repayment. He would also surrender any claim for management fees or reimbursement arising from his actions during my disappearance. No confession of criminal fraud. No absurd damages. Money tied to documented harm. Hart whispered with Colin. Then asked for a short recess. They returned 12 minutes later. Colin accepted. My father closed his eyes. Not in relief exactly. More like exhaustion. The corporate fight was ending. There was one more issue. The family memorandum. Not legally powerful enough to distribute my estate. Still damaging enough that I wanted the record corrected. Leah had prepared a simple document. Each family member who signed the memorandum would acknowledge. I was alive. No estate had been opened. No property transfer had occurred through that memorandum. No family member possessed ownership or control based on it. Mom signed first. Then Dad. Natalie. Rebecca witnessed. Colin was last. He stared at the page. Then at me. You really need this? Yes. Why? Because 3 months ago you put cards under my property saying who got what. His face reddened. It was a funeral. Exactly. I slid the page closer. If we're going to write things down, let's write down the part where I came home. For the first time that day, his mouth almost smiled. Then he signed. That evening, my parents invited both of us to dinner. I declined. So did Colin. Some things did not need immediate healing. I drove instead to the Rangeley cabin. Natalie was there. She had opened the windows. The lake was flat and silver under the evening sky. On the kitchen counter sat the little funeral card. For Natalie, Rangeley House. I picked it up. You really kept this? Yes. Why? She poured coffee. Because Mom told me you'd have wanted me to have it. I might. Her eyebrows lifted. What? Eventually. She stared at me. I smiled slightly. Not because I died. That made her laugh. Good. Then I became serious. But if I ever give it to you, it'll be because I chose to. She nodded. I understand. That was all I had wanted from everyone. Choice. My property. My company. My time. My help. None of those became more available simply because people expected me to say yes. Before bed, I received one final message. From Colin. No apology. No argument. Just a photograph. My funeral toast. Someone in the crowd had taken it seconds before I opened the ballroom doors. Colin stood beneath my portrait. Glass raised. My watch on his wrist. Everyone looking at him. Under the photo, he wrote, "I think this was the moment I stopped grieving you and started trying to become useful enough that nobody would ask when I was giving your life back." I stared at the sentence. Then another arrived. "I'm sorry." I did not reply. Not yet. Forgiveness did not need to be rushed just because accountability had finally arrived. I put the phone down. 3 months earlier, I walked into a room where my family had already written the ending. Tonight, every document that mattered had been corrected. The company was mine again. The properties were mine. My estate plan still stood. Colin's authority was gone. And for the first time since I came home, there was nothing left for me to reclaim. Only a life I still had to decide how to live. 1 year after I walked into my own funeral, my mother asked whether we could have dinner together. Not a memorial. Not an anniversary. Not an attempt to recreate the night everything broke. Just dinner. At least, that was what she said. I almost refused. Then she added, "Colin will be there." That changed the question. I had seen my brother only twice in 11 months. Both times involved lawyers. The civil settlement. The Stonewall wind down. Nothing personal. Nothing resembling family. I asked, did he ask for this? No. Did Dad? No. Then why? Mom was quiet for a moment. Because last year I stood at your funeral thinking I had lost one son. Her voice softened. Then you came home and I realized I might lose both anyway. I understood what she meant. That did not make dinner automatically wise. Still, I said yes. Not because reconciliation was owed. Because I wanted to know whether we could sit at the same table without turning the past into either a weapon or an excuse. That felt like a reasonable test. A lot had changed in a year. Mercer Civil Works had repaid more than half the North Coast Bridge facility. Harbor Ridge was still on schedule. Sarah Fenwick remained COO and had become more influential than ever. The board revised emergency authority procedures so thoroughly that even I needed 2 approvals for certain extraordinary decisions. I approved the changes. Especially the ones limiting me. That surprised Colin when he heard about them. Apparently he still thought my problem had been losing control. It wasn't. My problem had been people using unclear control. There was a difference. Stonewall no longer existed. Its equipment reservations were sold or cancelled. Its remaining receivables went through the wind down. Bryce Talbot settled with Mercer Civil after the board threatened litigation over undisclosed pricing and incomplete representations. No spectacular courtroom trial. No handcuffs. He paid money. Signed releases. Moved on. Colin's $2.1 million settlement remained outstanding, but he was making payments. Monthly. On time. His ownership in Stonewall's wind down produced less than he hoped. His condo had been refinanced. 2 investment accounts were liquidated. He lost money. A lot of it. But not everything. That mattered. Consequences should match the conduct. Not my anger. My father lost more than $900,000 of the $3 million he put behind Colin. Painful. Not ruinous. He and Mom still had income from the Portland properties. Still had retirement assets. Still had their house. For several months, Dad waited for me to offer to fill the gap. I didn't. Then something unexpected happened. He stopped waiting. He sold a boat he barely used. Reduced spending. Worked with an advisor. Adjusted. The world did not end. That was important for all of us. Sometimes people became dependent on rescue because rescue arrived too early for them to discover they could survive without it. Natalie changed least. Maybe because she had done the least. She still visited Rangeley. Still kept the funeral property card in a kitchen drawer. And every few months she sent me a photograph of it with some new joke. Checking whether you're still alive before I mow the lawn. Or, can't inherit this until you miss 2 consecutive birthdays. New family rule. Dark humor. I appreciated it. 6 months after my return, I rewrote my estate documents. Not because the old plan was bad. Because I had learned where ambiguity lived. Pine Harbor Trust remained independent trustee. Mercer Civil shares still would not pass directly to family. My parents' income trust remained. Natalie still had the right to buy the Rangeley cabin. Colin's trust remained too. That surprised Leah. You're not removing him? No. After everything? Yes. She studied me. Why? Because my estate plan is not a punishment document. That answer felt right. Colin's future inheritance would remain controlled and distributed over time. No business authority. No fiduciary role. No control over other beneficiaries. But I was not writing him out merely to make a point. He was still my brother. That fact did not restore trust. It did not erase accountability. It simply remained true. Leah nodded. That is either very mature or very expensive therapy. Probably both. The family dinner was at my parents' house. Not the Whitmore Hotel. I insisted. No ballroom. No catering. No champagne display. Mom made roast chicken. Dad opened wine. Natalie brought dessert. When I arrived, Colin was already there. He stood when I entered. That was awkward. We looked at each other. Same family. Different year. He had lost weight. Not dramatically. Enough that I noticed. His hair was shorter. He no longer wore expensive watches. That should not have mattered. It did. Maybe because the last time I saw him at a family event, he had mine on his wrist. Adrian. Colin. He held out his hand. I looked at it. Then shook it. No hug. That was enough. Dinner began carefully. Too carefully. Weather. Harbor Ridge. Natalie's work. Dad complaining about property taxes. Mom describing a neighbor's new dog for 10 full minutes because none of us knew what else to discuss. Then Colin put down his fork. I'm going to say something before everyone spends the whole night pretending. Mom looked terrified. I almost smiled. Go ahead. He looked at me. I was wrong. Simple. No explanation attached. No because. No but. That mattered. I told myself I was stepping up. He continued. I told myself Mercer Civil needed me. I told myself Stonewell was going to work if I could just get through the first few months. His eyes dropped. And every time I crossed a line, I made the reason sound bigger than the line. Nobody spoke. That was probably the best description of his behavior I had heard. He continued. I also liked being in your place. There. The harder truth. Not because I wanted you dead. He swallowed. But because for once, people were looking at me like I was the person who could solve things. I nodded. I know. He looked surprised. You do? Yes. What I didn't understand before was how much that mattered to you. His mouth tightened. It mattered too much. No argument from me. He looked at Dad. I used your money because I wanted to prove I could build something without Adrian. Dad said nothing. Colin continued. Then I used Adrian's company to keep that proof from failing. He looked back at me. That's the part one couldn't admit. There it was. The circle. He wanted independence so badly that he built it on my resources. The irony would have been funny if it had not cost everyone so much. I asked. What are you doing now? He seemed confused. What? For work. Mom looked relieved that the conversation had moved. Colin answered. Project procurement for a regional contractor. Employee? Yes. No ownership? No. He almost smiled. They make me disclose conflicts. Natalie laughed before she could stop herself. Even Colin laughed. Small. Embarrassed. Human. That helped more than another apology would have. After dinner, Dad brought out a bottle of bourbon. I stared at it. No toast. He held up both hands. I wasn't going to. Mom looked guilty. Natalie grinned. Colin said. Probably safest. We moved to the living room. That was when Dad handed me an envelope. What's this? Open it. Inside was a check. $100,000. I frowned. Dad. It's not for you. That confused me. Then why am I holding it? It's the first repayment on what I owe you. I stared at him. You don't owe me. Yes, I do. No. The investment account came from money you gave us. As a gift. I know. Then it was yours. He nodded. I know that too. I waited. He continued. This isn't legal. Good. Then what? I spent years acting like because you had more, you would always catch us. My mother looked down. Dad's voice softened. The $3 million was mine to lose. Yes. But the attitude was something I put on you. That landed. He pointed to the check. So this is not repayment for money. What is it? The Portland distributions this quarter. I still don't understand. We want to reduce what we take. I shook my head. No. Mom spoke. We don't need as much as the agreement gives us. That money is yours. Yes. She smiled slightly. And we're allowed to say no too. That stopped me. Of course. The whole family had learned the same lesson from opposite directions. Consent required refusal. Even generosity did. I looked at the check again. Then tore it in half. Dad stared. Adrian. The income arrangement stays unless you actually want to amend it for your own reasons. He opened his mouth. No guilt payments. I tossed the pieces onto the table. If we learned anything, it's that nobody gets to fix a relationship by moving money around. Dad looked at me. Then laughed. Quietly. Fair. That was probably the healthiest financial conversation my family had ever had. 2 months later, Harbor Ridge reached its major structural milestone. The state held a small event at the site. No giant celebration. Just officials, engineers, contractors, and local media. Sarah gave the project remarks. Not me. That had been her work. She deserved the microphone. Afterward, one reporter recognized me. Mr. Mercer, weren't you the engineer who was declared dead last year? Presumed dead by my family. She smiled awkwardly. Right. Important distinction. Can I ask what it felt like to walk into your own funeral? I had answered versions of that question dozens of times. Shock. Anger. Disbelief. This time, I gave the answer that had taken a year to understand. It felt like discovering how much of your life people can start rearranging when they assume you won't come back to correct them. The reporter blinked. That sounds dark. It was. Do you forgive your family? I looked toward Sarah talking with our project team. Then at my father standing beside Mom. Natalie nearby. Colin was not invited in any official role, but he had come as family and stood at the edge of the crowd. Some of them didn't need forgiving for what people thought they did. What do you mean? The funeral looked like everyone divided my estate. I paused. The truth was Messier. Was someone trying to take it? My brother made serious decisions he had no business making. I did not owe the reporter details from private settlements. And he paid consequences for them. The reporter waited. That's it? That's usually enough. No revenge speech. No public humiliation. I had already lived through the part that mattered. That evening, after Harbor Ridge, my family gathered at the Rangeley cabin. Natalie insisted. She grilled steaks badly. Dad complained. Mom fixed everything. Colin stayed mostly quiet. At sunset, Natalie brought out 5 glasses. I looked at her. No. She laughed. Relax. I'm not declaring anyone dead. She poured bourbon. Then handed one to me. You're doing the toast. Why? Because last time Colin did it and look how that turned out. Even Colin laughed. I stood on the porch. The lake turned orange behind the trees. Everyone waited. For one moment, I remembered the ballroom. The flowers. The empty coffin. Colin wearing my watch. My own face announcing a death that had not happened. Then I looked at the people in front of me. Alive. Imperfect. Still family. I raised the glass. To people who are still here. No one interrupted. To asking before assuming. Dad smiled. To paperwork that actually means what people think it means. Leah would have approved. Natalie laughed. Then I looked at Colin. And to never confusing someone else's absence with your permission. His smile disappeared. Not from anger. Recognition. He raised his glass. Fair. We drank. No applause. No property cards. No inheritance announcements. Just 5 people on a porch. That was better. Later, I walked down to the dock alone. The water was black and still. For months after the accident, I hated looking at open water. Now I could stand beside it without hearing the North Haven breaking apart. Healing, apparently, was not forgetting. It was remembering without being dragged backward. I checked the watch on my wrist. My grandfather's Omega. The one Colin wore during my funeral. I had considered selling it. Instead, I kept it. Not because I had reclaimed something from him. Because it had always been mine. That was the lesson underneath everything. My family could hold a funeral. They could write my name on a casket. They could imagine who would live where. My brother could draft memoranda. Seek authority. Move money. build plans around a future without me. But expectation did not create ownership. Grief did not create permission. Love did not create entitlement. And being the person everyone relied on did not mean I existed to absorb every consequence. I spent years believing strength meant carrying more. Now I understood something simpler. Strength also meant deciding what was never yours to carry. The first time I opened those ballroom doors, everyone looked at me like a dead man had come home. A year later, I no longer thought of it that way. I had not come back from the dead. I had come back before other people finished deciding what my life meant without me. This time, I got to finish it myself. And for the first time in a very long while, nobody at the table was waiting to inherit the answer. That's all for today. Remember to subscribe and support us.